Aye. I'd like to call the April 19th, 2023 Ad Hoc Committee meeting to order. Will the recording secretary please call roll?
Christopher Davis,
Present.
Monica Martinez,
Present?
Shireen Parbury.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you so much. The item before us today is the interview, recommendation, and appointment of members for the Committee on Accreditation. Our task today is to recommend to the full commission 2 individuals to fill the 2 K-12 vacancies on the Committee on Accreditation and 2 individuals to fill our 2 higher education vacancies on the Committee on Accreditation, each of whom would be appointed for a 4-year term starting this July 1st, 2023 and runs through June 2027. In addition, we may, if we wish, recommend appointment of any of the applicants to the alternate pool to serve in the event of a vacancy on COA. The full commission will then vote on their recommendations on Friday during agenda item 3K. Cheryl Hickey, will you please take us through the process?
Thank you. And again, thank you for giving up your time today and joining us for this important thing. Thanks for agreeing to be part of this ad hoc committee. Today, you'll be interviewing finalists for 4 vacancies on the Committee on Accreditation. And before you begin your first interview, we have a couple of things to share with you about the process. So each year, the commission interviews and appoints 3 individuals to serve new or continuing 4-year terms beginning in July of every year. This year, we have an additional retirement, so we have to fill 4 vacancies. The membership of COA is equally balanced. So we have 6 K-12 practitioners and 6 from the higher education community. And the leadership is also equally balanced with 1 co-chair from higher ed and 1 from K-12. And the current list of COA members is on page 1 and 2 of the agenda item. This year, the vacancies include 2 members from the K-12 community and 2 from higher ed, whose terms are up June 30th of 2023. The nominations process began late in 2022, as it always does, and was closed in February of 2023. And throughout that time, we announced the vacancies in the PSD e-news each week and on the commission's website. We are pleased to report that there were 10 applicants for the 4 positions, and unlike in some previous years, a significant number of K-12 applicants, so we love that. In concert with the process laid out in the framework, a nominating panel reviewed the applications. The nominating panel is comprised of individuals appointed by both the COA co-chairs and by the commission chair. And the sole purpose of that committee is to review all of the applications and to move forward to you, the ad hoc committee, 2 individuals to interview for each vacancy. The finalists you are interviewing today are put forward by that nominating committee. In addition to recommending the appointment of 4 individuals for the COA to fill the commission today, you may also recommend appointments to any of the applicants you interview to the alternate pool. And this pool is used by the executive director in the event of an unscheduled vacancy. It's helpful when we have a healthy alternate pool because the director can consider balance issues when appointing individuals to serve out expected vacancies. And the current alternate pool is severely lacking. And so the need to appoint individuals to the alternate pool exists should you deem that appropriate today. We have provided you with 5 broad questions to ask each applicant, and if you need to, you may ask for clarification on the responses, but in an effort to be fair to all candidates, we ask that you limit additional questions beyond these, unless something that you are prepared to ask all of the candidates. These questions were emailed to all the applicants this morning to give them a little bit of time to organize their thoughts. We've allotted 15 minutes for each candidate to respond to the questions. So asking them to be concise and limit their answers to a few minutes each, and we have already expressed that to them. We will need a few minutes between each interview to let the next one know we are ready for them and to make sure their technology is working. At the end of all interviews, you will deliberate and vote to recommend to the full commission those individuals. And as a reminder, you may appoint any of the applicants to the alternate pool from which the executive director can pull an unexpected vacancy. And I will turn this over to Erin Sullivan, my partner.
Thank you. Good afternoon. All right, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the balance of the Committee on Accreditation. So the issue of balance and representation is addressed on pages 3 and 4 of the agenda item. As a reminder, no COA member serves as a representative of their employer, but rather they serve because of their expertise in California education and educator preparation. Balance issues to consider are geographic representation, gender, racial and ethnic balance, segmental representation, size of the institution this person is coming from, and public versus private, among other considerations. The current members of the COA are listed on pages 1 and 2 of your item, as Cheryl mentioned. Of particular note, I would like to highlight a few things for your consideration. First, IHE sector balance. Currently, the COA has representation from all systems of higher education. The one vacancy is currently filled by a representative from the independent sector. Of the 5 continuing IHE representatives, 3 are from independent institutions, 1 is from a CSU, and 1 is from a UC. 2 are from a CSU? I apologize. I apologize.
I apologize. And we do lose the UC rep. That's the one
the
who's
person we're losing.
retiring. I apologize for that.
We're using last year's script and we
Yeah,
didn't
that
update
one,
it, so I apologize. Is the rest correct, Cheryl, or should I double check?
Let's double check.
Let's see, gender balance.
It's actually, and it's all in the.
Can you double check what you said about the independent colleges then?
We have representation from the independent colleges.
We-
Mhm.
Let me just pull this up because I can tell you just by looking at it.
Have the list right now.
You have it in the item. Okay, great.
So we lose.
that-
Jomeline is a teacher in the southern part of the state, and her term is up.
And Marty,
And Marty Martinez.
who is from Sacramento. So
Mhm.
we're losing him. So for the K-12, we're losing a Southern California person and we're losing a Sacramento area person, so Northern California. For the IHEs, we have, let's see,
That's just
two
one.
CSUs.
Mhm.
We have 2 CSUs. We have 2 privates. Thank you. I'm looking like diagonally across these. We have 2 privates. We have 3 privates, right? Because we have USC, we have Cal Lutheran, and we have Chapman.
Right.
So we have 3 privates, and we have 1 UC, and that is the position that we're losing. That's the vacancy, is the UC
And this one.
and the private. Oh, I forgot about my.
Yeah. So we're losing one private. We would lose one private. The private individual is an incumbent. Michael Hillis is an incumbent right now and is eligible for a second term.
That's why.
Cheryl Forbes is the one retiring and
Is not eligible for a
is
second
not
term.
moving forward.
And they're both from the SoCal area.
Mhm. The one additional thing I wanted to mention before you get started today is with the one of the applicants who comes from the UC, Ann Jones. She served on the COA in the past. She served a full 4-year term and had just started her second term when she took a job at the chancellor's office. So she did not fulfill the second term. So in speaking with in the past on this topic with our general counsel, because it's not prescribed as to whether or not that counts as a second term, that is entirely up to you to determine. She did not serve her first year as on the second term. So she
they have
could
a
technically.
yeah. They have a 4-year term and she didn't serve 1 year, a full year?
They can have 2 4-year terms.
Mhm.
She served 1 full 4-year term and was just starting her second term
Okay.
when she took a job with the chancellor's office. And now
Okay.
she's back at a campus and wanted to throw her hat back in the ring.
Okay. And then would we decide if that would be her first?
That would be her
Or
second
It would be
term.
her
We would,
final.
okay, it would
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
It would because the law says 2 4-year terms. It doesn't say they have to be consecutive or anything like that. But
Yeah, no, I
They can-
appreciate that because it means that she would only have 1 term
she's had 1 term. Yeah.
versus the rest of the candidates would
Right.
have the 2 terms. Okay.
Right.
Thank you. That's very helpful. clarification.
Also, just one final note about balance of the remaining individuals. Taking away the vacancies, we have 3 females
Mhm.
and six males on the COA. So as you fill the vacancies right now, just keeping note of that.
And the interviews, as I say, are not in, we haven't clumped them all according to K-12 or higher ed because of their schedules. We've tried to accommodate their schedules. So we're happy to answer any questions, or you can just get started.
I think you guys answered our questions in real time, but commissioners, does anybody else have any questions or clarification on who's leaving, who's staying, and the balance?
Since we're looking at balance, if you can give us, you gave us the gender distribution. Do you have handy the geographical, racial, ethnic? The public, private, I think we got. All the K-12 are obviously public, but the IHE, we just.
One of the areas of the state we do not currently have is Central Valley.
We don't.
We do not have a current, no. We have a preponderance of Southern California.
Yeah.
Let me, it's in the item, and let me see what page that is. Here.
And racial, ethnic?
We have, to use Cheryl's terminology, a preponderance of Caucasian.
Mhm.
I think we have one identified African American, one Latinx, maybe two Latinx. And that's really it.
Thank you for the orders.
Any questions?
And some of those balance issues are on page 3 of the item, so.
Okay.
And the item is accurate, even though my script was
Yeah.
not.
Okay. So now we're going to open for public comment. Members of the public who are attending the meeting at the commission office will need to submit a request to address the commission card to the meeting moderator. Individuals who join the meeting via teleconference, please notify the meeting moderator by clicking on the raise hand icon if you're participating through Zoom, and then press *9 if you're participating by phone. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
We have no public comments on this item.
Okay. Just give it a second for anybody on Zoom. Okay. The public comment period for this item is now closed. As we said in the opening, and as Ms. Hickey told us, we have 4 finalists for 2 K through 12 and 4 finalists for 2 higher education vacancies on COA. And this is a very good problem for the commission to have. We appreciate the interest by everyone. Our discussion decisions will take place after we've interviewed all the candidates. Please keep in mind that we also appoint individuals to the alternate pool so the executive director can pull from this pool to fill any unexpected vacancies. We're now going to bring in our first applicant. And just for the public to know, and of course, we will remind the candidates that each have 20 minutes, and we have a series of 5 questions that each of the commissioners will share and ask. So we're ready for our first candidate?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. All right, there you are. Okay. This is Julie. Uh-oh.
Can you hear me?
We could hear you, but we can't see you.
Really? I can see myself.
There you are. You're back.
There we go.
Don't you always hate talking to yourself? Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So, as you may have heard in the opening, I am Commissioner Monica Martinez. Joining me on the interview panel are Commissioners Christopher Davis and Shireen Pavri. Dr. Pavri is an Assistant Vice Chancellor, Educator and Leadership Programs for the California State University CSU Office of the Chancellor. She's our higher ed liaison. And Dr. Christopher Davis is a middle school language arts teacher for the Berryessa Union School District. And he also works at the National Board Resource Center at Stanford University. And he is our liaison to the Accreditation Committee. So I want to thank you first and foremost for taking the time and applying to be a member of the COA and taking the time to join us today. We're just going to ask you 5 questions, as you probably heard. And at the end of the interview, you'll have an opportunity to ask us any questions. Just a reminder, we have 20 minutes. Are we putting a timer up on the screen? Okay, so 20 minutes. We'll keep time here and try to give you any warnings. And Just think about that as you address each of the questions. So since I have the microphone, I will go ahead and start with the first question, and then my colleagues will share in the other questions asking you so that we all get to meet you. Please briefly describe your professional experiences in education and educator preparation in California. We're interested in your teaching experiences, your work with diverse K through 12 students or credential candidates, and or issues that you are especially focused on in your own work.
All right, thank you. And I really appreciate not only the opportunity, but the flexibility in the schedule. I'm actually in the school district of a site visit that I just completed as team lead. And I appreciate the panel working with me to make sure that both of these things could happen. So thank you. So I began my career in as a deaf and hard of hearing teacher. And so special education has always been something that's very close to my heart. At that time, there were not enough deaf students in my community to teach. And so I switched over to general education. I was a general education teacher for 20 years in grades K through 6. And in a school that served many students who came from low socioeconomic backgrounds. Many were English language learners and did not have historical educational backgrounds. And I loved being there. And both of those experiences as an educator really taught me the importance of special education and general education working together to serve the needs of all students rather than their students or my students, really working together to collaborate and serve all students. And it also really gave me a passion for serving the needs of English language learners and students of poverty. This is something that I developed a great deal of professional development offerings for the teachers in my program about because of my experiences as a teacher in my school. I also had a lot of students who had undergone trauma in different ways. And so, especially now, as we look at so many students have gone through trauma, that's been something that's really been a focus of mine in training new teachers and supporting them as they try to support the needs of their students. I was one of the people who began the BITSA program as it was then in Santa Clarita. And I have been a mentor for 25 years. I still continue to mentor new teachers because I think that's essential work. I love it. And I think it's important to be hearing from new teachers and seeing what's happening in the classrooms and being a part of that. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. I was also a trainer of trainers for mentors in LA County, and that really taught me the central role of mentors in any induction program and how essential it is for teacher preparation programs and teacher candidates to have that support. I became the coordinator of the Walnut Valley and Teacher and CASC induction program 12 years ago. And I've really learned the importance of the wider system of support for programs, of it not just being induction in isolation, but creating partnership with district leaders, with site leaders, with IHE collaboratives. I've worked very closely with my IHE partners as we work to really create a smooth transition from teacher preparation to induction. I also have been the chair of the Los Angeles County Cluster Leadership Group for 9 years. And it's a wonderful group. We have a wide array of programs, charter schools, single district programs, consortiums, county office, And of course, our big LAUSD program. And I've worked with those directors in leadership, but also new directors across the cluster, across LA County. And we really worked hard to serve the needs of those new directors and making sure that they have the tools and the support they need to have high quality programs. And so we've really tried to build that support system and communicate with them regularly. And that's been a really important part of the work that I do. And that's my experience.
Thank you for that very in-depth answer. Excuse me, with 14 minutes remaining, I want to make sure that we are mindful of time, but here's question number 2. Good afternoon, by the way. Please summarize your involvement in accreditation activities in general and share with us any experiences you have with the Commission's accreditation system.
Thank you. I have been a BIR member for 11 years and a team lead for site visits for 8 years. And it's been an amazing experience to see both programs that are exemplars and ones that needed support going forward. And it really made me believe in the accreditation system and the good that it does for helping to guide programs going forward. I've also been a member of numerous CTC work groups over the years, and most recently the CSDP revision team, and then the special ed TPA design team, both of which really were great experiences on working with the IHEs, but also really understanding how the TPEs relate to the standards. We did a deep dive into those, and also the performance expectations and the performance assessments. We got to take a deep dive into those as well, and really look at what's expected of teachers as they come out of teacher preparation, which has really helped me in my role moving forward, especially with my teachers who have executive order credentials. I've been fortunate to work with many amazing CTC consultants and teams, and really learned from all of them on what is most important in these programs, what makes them strong, and also really the focus on the standards themselves. I feel like it's important that it be an equitable system and be done with integrity. And I've been fortunate enough to learn from many, many people over the years.
Thank you for that. And one more question for me. As a member of the Committee on Accreditation, what do you think are the most important things to look for in making an accreditation decision for an institution?
Well, I think all decisions must be equitable, right? It's got to be based on standards. And most importantly, at the foundation, is it serving the educator's needs? And if not, what needs to be in place, right? I also think it's important to take the whole organization into consideration, particularly the continuous cycle of improvement. Is that in place? What kinds of things, what systems are in place to support the programs and also to support at its very core the needs of the people that it serves? And also, how will the process create an opportunity for this program to move forward and improve, right? And to serve its constituents better. I think that's one of the things that I've very much admired about the accreditation system, is that it has positive intentionality and really looks at how to support these programs moving forward and guide them to give them that opportunity to improve if they're not there yet, and to recognize really excellent programs, because I think that's important as well.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Ms. Sheldon. I'm not sure. Oh, yes. Okay, you can see me. I was just going to say, I'm not sure you can see me, but I'm right here. I have the pleasure of asking you the next two questions. So I'll go ahead with question 4. As we think about our statewide collective experience in educator preparation, navigating the pandemic and other complex social issues over the past few years, what lessons or insights should we take into the future with respect to the Commission's accreditation system?
Thank you for that question. It's something that I think a great deal about. I think education, the educational system and the culture is going to be really adjusting to these things over time, and education will be at the forefront of that. There's going to be a long-lasting impacts of the pandemic, and then of the various social issues, changes in diversity of student population, teacher population. I think these are all really important things to consider moving forward. We already know that some of the impacts have been on technology, right? And the use of technology and the different ways that technology can be used. A need to focus on support in the areas of mental health for students and for teachers. And looking at how to attract more teachers to the profession, especially from diverse communities that mirror the students that they serve. And then also better ways to build in culturally responsive practices. And so those are just some of the things. And so I think it will be important for accreditation to stay grounded in the standards always, because that's what the foundation of everything, right? But I also think it's important to understand that there are different ways that the programs meet those standards, and that those will be changing and evolving over time, and to really be open to how are the programs responding to their candidates' needs, and not just look at how did we do it before, to really look at are they responding to the needs of the people, the candidates that they serve, and how are they making adjustments based on those needs. And I think it's really exciting, some of these changes, these challenges. And I think the creativity and responsiveness of the programs is going to be essential as they meet those standards and move forward with their programs. And I think accreditation will need to be listening, absolutely, to what the people on the ground are saying, what the needs are, what are they seeing from the data, and then seeing how those standards are served with those considerations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The last question is is there anything else that you would like to add that you think would be important for us to know as we consider your application for the COA?
Yes, thank you for that. I just want to say that I deeply believe in the accreditation system, because I think it is fundamental to educational equity for students. I believe that we know that the effectiveness of the teacher in the classroom is the most impactful factor, right? And every child deserves an excellent teacher, no matter how many years that teacher has been teaching. And so for every student to have an effective teacher, to have an excellent educational experience, no matter where they come from, no matter their socioeconomic status, no matter their language levels, no matter their cultural background, that they have the same access to excellent education. And so because of that, teacher candidates must have access to excellent training. They must have equitable training opportunities no matter what institution they attend. And they must be meeting the standards. They must be responding to the needs of these teacher candidates. And of course, as an induction director, I've I feel it's so important, the support of these new teachers, particularly in those first 2 years, so that they do gain the habits of mind to make them effective educators for the entire span of their career. And for that, there has to be high quality support, it has to be mentor focused, and it has to be responsive to their needs and individualized. I think accreditation is just such an important, plays such an important role in making sure that there is equity across the system, because it all comes down to equity for students. And I think that's what everyone's focus is, education's focus is, and the accreditation system keeps that focus for all of the programs.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for the questions. Any other follow-up questions by the commissioners? Okay. Do you have any questions for us? We started a little bit late, so I would say you might have a minute or so, but we don't want to deny you the opportunity of asking a question, given the time you've taken to apply for this role and to be with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I don't have any questions for the panel.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for your interest. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for the work you do right now. And we will be making a decision, as you know, and it's a public meeting. So we will be in touch with you, and then we'll work again with our commissioners on Friday around the issue.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to see all of you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next candidate will be Ann Jones, joining us by Zoom.
Hello.
Okay. Hi there. How are you?
Great.
Thank you. Great. Well, thank you for joining us. I am Commissioner Monica Martinez. Joining me on the interview are Commissioners Christopher Davis and Commissioner Shireen Pavri. Dr. Pavri is Assistant Vice Chancellor, Educator and Leadership Programs for the California State University, Office of the Chancellor, and she is one of our higher education representatives and liaison on the commission. And Dr. Christopher Davis is a middle school language arts teacher for Berryessa Union School District. He also works with the National Board for certification at Stanford University, and he's our liaison to the Accreditation Committee. We're excited to be interviewing for this role, and we really thank you for applying to be a member of COA. We're going to ask you 5 questions, and at the end of the interview, you'll have an opportunity to ask us any questions that you have. There's a total of 20 minutes. I'll go ahead and set the timer, and you know, we try to keep on time, and we want to save time for you to be able to ask us any questions. So keep that in mind as you answer your questions, but I also don't want you to feel rushed. I think 20 minutes is good time for 5 questions. Since I have the microphone, I'll go ahead and just start with the first question, and then both the commissioners will also ask you some of the 5 questions, okay? So to start off, just briefly describe your professional experiences in education and educator preparation in California. We're interested in your teaching experience, your work with diverse K-12 students or credential candidates, and/or issues that you are especially focused on in your work.
Great. Thank you so much for that welcome and the introductions. I'm very, very excited to be here. And if I am looking in various places, it's because I can see 2 of myself on the screen, and I'm also looking at another window. So there's a lot to process visually here. In response to your first question, I started my career in public education as an elementary school teacher. Actually, prior to being a public school elementary teacher, I was a private school teacher. And when I got my credential, began in public schools, mostly in grades K through 4. I was also a substitute when my kids were young, and I specialized in SDC substitute gigs, mostly because they were hard to find and I was willing to do the work, and that began some of my interest in special education. Prior to returning to graduate school, I worked as a paraprofessional for severe to profoundly impacted children in Irvine Unified School District. And as you probably know from my application, I'm now in higher education. My current position is Assistant Dean for Student Affairs and Community Partnerships at the University of California, Davis. In higher education, I began my career at another UC campus. I was coordinator and director for teacher education at two different UCs, UC Irvine and UC Riverside. My focus then was on world languages, bilingual education, and special education. And currently in my portfolio as assistant dean at UC Davis, I have teacher education admissions, credentialing, and accreditation in my portfolio. And I will close by saying that currently what I'm focused on is I am very interested in developing new programs, in particular in special education and early childhood education in the school here. I will say as a side note, something that I had nothing to do with creating, but that I'm very, very proud of is having here at Davis not one, but two bilingual education programs in Spanish and Mandarin. So very, very proud of that because I think bilingual education is very important.
And good afternoon. Got the next question for you. Please summarize your involvement in accreditation activities in general and share with us any experiences you've had with the Commission's accreditation system.
Sure. Well, my experiences with the Commission's accreditation system started out bold and strong when I assumed the role as Director of Teacher Education at UC Riverside in 2007. I learned right off the bat that we were going to be in the first cohort to have an accreditation site visit since activities had been suspended. And that happened in 2008. So in 2007, 2008, my very first year, we were preparing for a site visit. During that time, I trained to become a member of the Board of Institutional Reviewers, BIR, to learn as much as I could about accreditation. And I subsequently got involved in BIR by both reading program submissions and documents, and also was a site visit member. And I attended trainings and refreshers every year, so was very involved that way. In 2009, I was selected to serve on the committee on accreditation, on the COA. And I was selected to be the co-chair in 2011 and 2012. I've also, since leaving that time on the COA, have been asked several times to serve on the COA nominating committee. And I am renewing my work with the BIR this summer. I'm participating in the July training. So I think I've had lots of different entry points into the work in the commission and enjoyed all of it.
Thank you. And I have the next question as well.
Okay.
As a member of the Committee on Accreditation, what do you think are the most important things to look for in making an accreditation decision for an institution?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And when I read it earlier this morning, it was interesting to me because sort of obviously meeting the program, the preconditions and the standards is critical, but the standards don't exist in a vacuum. They're there because they reflect really critical components. And so some of the most important questions I think to consider are, is the institution serving its candidates well? And there are lots of different ways that they can be serving their candidates in selecting the candidates, advising them, placing them, the supervision component, assessment, job support. So I think that's a really critical piece. Another that's attendant with that, I believe, is the institution serving its community well? And there are lots of different facets to that as well. Is the institution using data for continuous improvement? And is the leadership looking for ways to make the program better, to serve the students and the candidates better? Because the impact of a teacher education program is profound, both in the lives of its candidates and then the students that they serve. So I think that the bottom line is a program really deeply engaged in reflecting on its own practice for the benefit of the students and the teachers of California? And that's a big question.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jones. I have the next two questions. As we think about our statewide collective experience in educator preparation, navigating the pandemic and other complex social issues over the last few years, what lessons or insights should we take into the future with respect to the Commission's accreditation system?
Yeah, and that's a really big question as well, obviously. So some thoughts that I have are, one consideration is, and this is really ongoing. It's not particular to the last few years, but I think it's been highlighted in the last few years, which is, how do we think about the disparities that we have seen in public education, in both students' access and the ways in which schools and districts and leadership were able to respond. How do we look at those disparities, and how do we think about preparing teachers in ways that help them think about serving all of their learners in the context of these disparities, many of which are outside of the control of LEAs and teachers, but are the context in which LEAs and teachers find themselves, and in which institutions of higher education find themselves. I know that there, during the initial and then the subsequent reactions to the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lot of to and fro and push and pull between, in a good way, between the institutions of higher ed that were sponsoring credential programs and their candidates and their supervisors and their faculty, who were both trying to run academic programs and also align their practices and their postures with the ways in which the LEAs and the schools were having to pivot. So it would be nice to think that this last 3 years is the last time that we'll have to engage in such a monumental task, but I don't think it will be. So I think one thing is to think about how we fold in what we learned from those challenges into how we think about accreditation and programs moving forward. Another, which is attendant with that, is how do we support institutions and LEAs in addressing the very clear now teacher shortage without sacrificing quality and rigor. We know that some of the responses that we've had in this state to teacher shortages in the past have been emergency credentialing, ramping up intern programs, as a couple of examples. And those approaches have the advantage of increasing temporarily the diversity in our teacher workforce, but then also those very teachers are the ones that typically don't stay because the supports have not been, at least in my view, adequately built in. And that's a huge challenge. So, how do we think about the teacher shortage, and how do we address it in ways that are meaningful and will support long-term solutions? Again, sort of aligned with that, how do we diversify the teaching workforce? That's huge and critical and ongoing. How do we adapt to the rapidly shifting technological environment? That's huge. And then sort of a last thought that I had as well is, how do we ensure that our assessment systems continue to evolve and remain relevant and valid and useful? I think those are all big questions that the CTC and the accreditation system is going to play a big part in.
Great, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to add that you think would be important for us to know as we consider your application for the COA?
I'll just say that California has a great deal to be proud of in public education. I know there's a lot of public bashing that goes on, but I have had the privilege to see a lot of excellent work by dedicated people over the last several decades. I think our teacher preparation standards are a vanguard for the profession. I'm very, very proud of them as well. I would be honored to serve on the COA for another term. And also, this may sound kind of dorky, but thinking and learning about all the great work that's happening across the state is actually fun. My engagement with the CTC is some of the most both valuable but also enjoyable professional development that I've engaged in over my career. And so I'm very enthusiastic about whatever way I can serve.
Great. I appreciate the questions from the commissioners and the time. And just want to give you time to ask if you have any questions for us about the role, about the committee, or anything related to the commission.
I think that the one major question that I have is that in my previous service, the COA spent a fair bit of time, in addition, obviously, to reading accreditation reports and rendering opinions on accreditation that are important. But there was also a lot of work on the frameworks and the standards themselves and the handbooks and just tools to help the work. And I guess the question would be, how much is that still a part of the work of the COA in informing and shaping policy and not just, or not just is the wrong word, in addition to upholding the accreditation process and representing it, but informing it as well?
I'm going to see if our commissioner, who's a liaison, wants to respond to that, and then also give an opportunity for the staff from the commission to respond as well.
As someone who has attended at least 3 of the past meetings, I can say it's a huge part of what is going on there. And I take copious notes for each meeting. And so a lot of those deliberations about for accreditation is there, but also the framework for and the basis for rendering those decisions, making the again, designing that framework in consult with, of course, with our staff here. There's a lot of discussion about that, and I think I want to say about 40 to 50% of the meetings really are going over those policy decisions that are made beyond the committee, and then as it involves the work here in this building, that the committee itself makes lots of very, very informed decisions about how that looks out in the field. You know, when we talk about what the approval process is, what the parameters for that is, who reports regularly to the committee. All of those things are still discussed and deliberated in the meetings. Thanks for the question, by the way.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I'm very glad to hear it, especially because one of the things that I've seen evolve over the years with the CTC is continuing to build on and improve, becoming and being a resource for programs to do better. I think the field wants to do good work, and having a professional resource in the body that accredits is really important.
Thank you. And does anybody from the staff want to respond
No,
to the
just
question?
say that Commissioner Davis, you answered that perfectly. So.
All right.
Yes, it's still very much a part of the work of the Committee on Accreditation, and identifying trends or things that we see as being problematic for institutions and being able to think about them in terms of policy and bring it back to the commission to make policy changes. It's definitely a two-way street for sure.
Yeah. very important for us. So, well, I want to thank you for your time and your interest, and we'll be following up. And as you know, this is a public meeting, and then the commission will also meet over the next 2 days. So you can have plenty time with us outside of this meeting and interview today. So thank you again, and we're going to move on to our next candidate.
All right. Thank you so much.
So our next candidate is Mike Hillis. Oh, Hannah Getty. You know, I only had it bolded, so I don't. It's like so. Next, I guess I'll put it in red next time too. So Hannah Getty for our higher education rep. I know. No, I do it on here. Hi, Hannah. How are you? We're just going to give it a couple of minutes. It looks like we had 2 candidates still on. Okay. Okay. My apology for the delay, and welcome. And thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your interest in this role and the time that you are taking for this. I am Commissioner Martinez, and I am joined by 2 other commissioners today who are doing your interviews. We have Christopher Davis and Shireen Pabri. Dr. Pabri is the Assistant Vice Chancellor, Educator and Leadership Programs for the California State University Office of the Chancellor. She is our higher education liaison. And we have Dr. Christopher Davis, who is a middle school language arts teacher of the Barry S.A. Union School Teacher, who also works with the National Board Resource Center at Stanford University, and he is our COA liaison. And again, thank you for taking the time to apply, and we're just going to ask you 5 questions today, and we'll take 20 minutes. Within that time, we'd love to leave time for you to be able to ask us any questions at the end of the interview. And so we don't think the 20 minutes is a challenge. I'll keep an eye on the clock, but it's been great. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable answering the questions and that you have time to ask us a question. I'm going to start off with the first question, and then Commissioner Davis will have 2, and then Commissioner Shireen will take on 2, so that you get a little bit of all of us and that we get to hear from you. So I'll just start with the first question, which is just kind of an overview question, and asking you to just describe and summarize your professional experiences in education and educator preparation here in California. And we're also interested in learning about your teaching experiences, your work with diverse K-12 students or credential candidates, and or other issues that you especially focus on in your own work.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you again for having me. I am grateful to be here. So I started my career actually as a second career when I went into education, and I started in the Cal State system to get my teaching credential. I ended up being a high school English teacher, and I was placed at a school on the west side of Long Beach. I think we had a very high percentage of disadvantaged students coming from homeless and foster youth, and working with our students in Long Beach, I think really sparked the rest of my career. It was my passion to be able to really focus on open access for all students and making sure that we were able to reach every student with a viable, equitable path to whatever it is they want to do, career in college. And so through that, I was in Long Beach Unified for several years. I taught various levels of English, ELA, English Language Arts. I taught freshmen, sophomores. I also ended up teaching an advanced placement class in 11th grade. And that was one of my greatest experiences, because the students I had in my class were most of them reading at a 3rd or 4th grade level. But we were able to really engage with the critical thinking aspect of a language and composition. So it was a focus on rhetoric and how do we use language. And I learned early on in my career that students from all backgrounds, regardless of what they faced, have so much to bring to the table. And sometimes we put these barriers in front of them, obviously, that we're not able to get that out of them. So through that class and getting them prepped for this exam, not many of them passed the AP exam, but they definitely gained a very valuable experience and went on to careers that, you know, through college. And some of them, I have one student that used to come to me with an essay and we would sit after school and rewrite. She was a language learner and she would use the thesaurus and she would try all these activities to bring in these words. And I kept just saying, use your voice. It's so powerful. And she just recently finished her PhD and she had a double focus and now she's teaching in the university level. So there's things like that I think have always been the moments of pause for me where I look back. So through my teaching career, I taught also in a co-teach classroom with a special education teacher. And then I was in the high school setting as a teacher for about 14 years, went into school administration where I served as a site and a district administrator, focused in the areas of student services. And during the pandemic was also doing educational technology, and then also took on a role of assistant superintendent of HR. And this accumulated sort of during the pandemic time when we had people sort of moving and leadership turnovers, and just really focused on how can we make sure that all students are getting access to not just curriculum, but to adults, caring adults. And I think that's really been my focus in all of K-12. From that moment, I took a shift into higher ed, where I was working in teacher preparation programs, teaching methodology courses, serving as an administrative coach. And I am now serving as the associate dean for the Lefevre College of Education at the University of Laverne, really focused on those teacher workforce pipelines and helping to create access so that we can get more teachers in classrooms that look like the students they serve. And I would say throughout my entire time in K-12 and now even in higher ed, my focus has remained the same. And that was about really reducing barriers and making sure that all students have the pathway to have several pathways so that they can choose their college and career choices that they deserve to have.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Getty. I have question number 2 for you. Please summarize your involvement. Oh, I apologize. Please summarize your involvement in accreditation activities in general and share with us any experiences you have with the Commission's accreditation system.
Thank you. Initially, on a high school campus, I served as our WASC coordinator. So I was very familiar with aspects of accreditation just through the WASC process. I also helped lead and oversaw the activities to become a national demonstration site for AVID. So those two things, I think, prep me for really understanding what accreditation means, being able to not just document what you're doing, but how you're doing it, and how does what you're doing prove and meet certain standards, certain expectations. Here in this role, I have very much enjoyed learning and going through the process of initial program review and writing to new programs for the CTC. As I took on this role, one of my real great focuses was the co-teaching aspect and being able to really help in the shortage area for ed specialists. And so as I was doing that and reaching out to our K-12 partners, I realized we did not have an extensive support needs credential, a MOD Severe, which is now extensive support needs. So I worked with our program chair and a couple of our faculty to get that written, and we submitted that. And so that was my first time ever going through the initial program review, which we are now in, and getting feedback from the CTC, from the groups that are reviewing what we're doing. And it's been very eye-opening for me, and I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate the process, and I really appreciate how we as a group are collaborating to come to a consensus of, why are we doing what we're doing? Is this the best way we can do it? Can we do it better? And so I really love that process of continuous improvement and being able to gather groups, look at the data, use the data to inform, and not be afraid to ask the questions of why should we still be doing this? How can we do it better? And so it's really exciting time for us here as we are now also approaching the PK3. I think we're actually trying to submit the PK3 today. And so that's been a lot of fun, just bringing two college departments together, child development and teacher education, and being able to go through that process and write to the standards, and being able to really challenge everyone to think about, how does this meet these standards and what we're doing? So I can also say, separate from that, which has sort of brought, I think, my whole experience to make some meaning for me. As the assistant superintendent of HR, I was overseeing the initial part of CalSAS, that program where in K-12, HR departments were now being tasked with really looking at that credential monitoring aspect. And coming from the student services side, having worked with our student information system at the time was Aries, but having worked with CalPADS reporting from that system and how we reported on what credentials our teachers held, specifically in our CTE programs, specific programs, and how they mapped it, then making sure we're also mapping it correctly. So when the two systems report that we're getting a full read. And one area that was coming up a lot for missed assignments was the area of special education. So that was really eye-opening to me as well, to really talk about least restricted environment and what the IEP process documents and how do we get that reported so that we show we are doing what is best for the student. And this is what was agreed to by the IEP team. So I think now with all the different parts I'm doing, it, like I said, it's been very helpful in the role I'm serving, because many people I'm working with don't have that experience. So I'm able to sort of share why things are the way they are and why systems need to align in a certain way. And then really just focus on that continuous improvement process and how important it is.
Thank you. And
Sure.
Another question. As a member of the Committee on Accreditation, what do you think are the most important things to look for in making an accreditation decision for an institution?
Thank you. I think it goes back to one of the things I said is really making sure those standards are being met. I think initially it is easy for people who are in a program to say what they're doing, but to really be able to document how they're doing it. And if this is the evidence, can you tell me how this is meeting that standard, and being able to really explain that. It brings me back to my teaching days. One strategy I used to always use with my students was that concept of, the avid concept of Cornell notes. And if this is the answer, what is the question? And so I use that even now today when we're saying, okay, if this is the evidence, right, what is the question? And oftentimes the question isn't the right question. We're not answering the right question with that evidence. So I think being able to give those strategies to people that are very familiar and very passionate about their programs, being able to help them prove that they are meeting those standards. But I think, the standards are there for a reason. They're important, they're necessary. And I think many times program chairs, department chairs, faculty, because of the passion they have for what they're doing, sometimes maybe forget to think about how important those standards are, or why, what we're doing matches those standards. And then making sure that we're not putting in added things that are causing more barriers, right? I can give you an example of a pathway we have that over time just grew, and it grew based on the passion that educators had, that our faculty had, that maybe was in demand, maybe 15 years ago in the market. And now looking at it, we had to really ask, gosh, I know you guys love teaching this class, but is this a class that is helping us with our standards? Is it something that is necessary for our candidates? Or is it costing more money and time for our candidates? And that's a hard question to ask when, people are very passionate about, a particular course or a topic. So I think for me, the most important aspect is making sure those standards are met, and making sure that there's really an open mind, because I think you can meet the standards in very many different ways. We don't want every program to look exactly the same. Not everybody going through a credential program has exactly the same needs. So I think if the institution understands the market they're serving, the people, the candidates that they are serving, the community that they're partnering with, to make sure they're able to then demonstrate how they meet those standards.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Good afternoon, Dr. Getty. Before I go into my question, I actually had a follow-up on one of the questions that was asked of you earlier. In terms of your accreditation experiences, I was wondering, have you gone through the BIR training? Have you been on site visits? Has that been part of?
As part for CTC? No, I have not.
That's right. That's right. Oh,
yeah, I have not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the question I have for you is, as we think about our statewide collective experience in educator preparation, navigating the pandemic and other complex social issues over the past few years, what lessons or insights should we take into the future with respect to the Commission's accreditation system?
Thank you. This is a really interesting question for me. It is an area of focus of my research, and my research is focused on, or has been focused on, female leadership during a crisis, specifically the pandemic in the K-12 system. And some of the patterns, some of the elements and themes that I uncovered in my research was really about how these leaders engaged their community partners, how they used collaborative work groups, how they used shared decision making to come together to really sort of relook at something that nobody was expecting, right? So a crisis like the pandemic or other topics or issues or things that are really should cause us to take pause. Being able to have a little bit of grace and being able to be flexible and really being able to decide what has to happen. What are the compliance areas? What are the things that we can't budge on? And what are the things that we can? And what are the barriers to helping us being able to meet those things? So I think as we look through what we've just recently gone through, one of the analogies I've sort of used is, a wave came through and wiped out all of our sandcastles. And if you've ever tried to rebuild sandcastles, you can't ever build the same one. And I think a mistake that we could be making in K-12 specifically would be to try to rebuild exactly what we had instead of using what has happened to inform and shape us as we move forward. And so I think as it's in respect to the commission's accreditation system, those standards stay. But maybe in looking at a certain situation of how we meet those standards, right? We went from completely everything in person. Nobody even really knew, if you think about it, what Zoom was, right? Many people, the majority of people. And so to think about how we were able to adapt and flex to what the need was, I think that's really important, is to have that little bit of grace, have that flexibility, but sort of keep that focus on what are those standards? What are the things that have to happen? And what is fair and equitable for what we're doing?
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to add that you think would be important for us to know as we consider your application for the COA?
Thank you. I think for me, I am a people person. I love meeting people. I love talking to educators from all levels. It's been one of the most exciting aspects of this role here, is because I get to go into the world that I'm very familiar with, is K-12, but I'm also in a higher ed setting, and being able to really connect people's experiences. I think having gone into education as a second career, I was a business major and I was in sales and other aspects. When I went into education, I came in a little bit different than some of the people I was around. And I've always sort of held a very different perspective. And I think being able to listen and create those bridges, right? I think sometimes there's a disconnect between K-12 and higher ed. And so being able to be that liaison to bridge that is a focus of mine. It's something I enjoy doing. I love collaborating. I love hearing new ideas. I think innovation is the key, especially to education and how we create pathways for our students, for our faculty. How do we keep our teachers in K-12 and in higher ed motivated and excited? And then how do we support our instructional leaders? How do those administrators get to grow their own vision for their sites, for their districts, and being able to really support that? I have a master's in rhetoric and composition, as you know, as an English teacher. So I'm a strong writer. I can help in writing reports and aspects as such as that. So I think overall, I'm just a very curious person and I love innovation. And so I would love to share in this process.
Okay, thank you. Any follow-up questions, commissioners? Appreciate your follow-up question earlier. Do you have any questions for us? We have probably like 1 minute left, but we're happy to answer any of your questions, either of the commissioners or the commission staff.
Thank you. I think maybe just one basic question is I don't know how often does the committee meet, or what are what does that obligation look like?
Would you like to address that question, our liaison?
Well, the committee meets every other month, I believe.
Approximately,
or
yes.
thereabouts, but generally before the commission meeting. So it's usually a few weeks before the commission meeting, but that's about the frequency of it. And all of those meeting dates are posted on the commission website.
Okay. So it's just in those meeting times. There's not additional times or.
It's mostly just the meeting time.
It's mostly just a meeting time. I don't know if there are any kind of ad hoc committees or,
Sure.
other committees that meet, but generally, I've only attended 3 meetings, and all this fair disclosure here. So I have not seen all of those big interworkings, but our staff people are basically nodding, saying, yes, it's just those meetings that are 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we have about 7 meetings a year.
Oh, excuse me, 7 meetings.
Heavy in the spring because that's when the site visits tend to be.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for the question, and appreciate again your time and your interest and your commitment to being here and to the field in your role at Laverne, at the University of Laverne. So thank you. And we're going to go ahead and move on to our next candidate given our time limitations. So
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You bet. Now we'll move on to Mike Hillis. Okay. We can all use the moment. That'd be great. Cheryl, my clarifying question around the reappointments, is it 1 term then?
Sorry, can you repeat
If
that?
someone is being reappointed, is that 1 term?
Yes,
of
it would
4
be 1
years?
term. Yes.
They already served the 1st term.
Exactly. The law requires or limits it to 2 4-year terms.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have everybody's cell phone number, so just seeing if she's texted him. I know. Doing really well. Okay. Okay, she's calling him. It's right on time.
Are we right on?
Mm-hmm. This is 3:10.
No, we are. Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right, he's logging on.
Thanks for following up on that.
You may be having technical issues. Let's say, oh, he's on. Great.
Okay. Oh. Hi there. We'll just give it a second. Make sure we've transitioned from candidates. All right. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us today. And most of all, thank you for your interest in being reappointed to your role in COA. I'm Commissioner Monica Martinez, and joining me on the interview today are Commissioners Christopher Davis and Commissioner Shireen Pavri. Dr. Pavri is Assistant Vice Chancellor, Educator, and Leadership Programs for the California State University Office of the Chancellor. She's our higher ed liaison. And Dr. Christopher Davis is a middle school language arts teacher for the Berryessa Union School District, and he also works at the National Board Resource Center at Stanford University, and he's our liaison to COA, so you may have actually seen him before. Thank you again for applying. We're going to ask you 5 questions, and we have around 20 minutes for all of the questions, and we want to make sure we give you time if you want to ask us any questions as well. So with that, I'm going to begin with the first question, which is just really kind of a high-level overview, asking you to summarize your professional experiences in education and educator prep here in California. We're also interested in learning about your teaching experiences, your work with diverse K-12 students or credential candidates, and issues that you especially focus on in your own work. So that's the first question, and then my commissioners will follow up with other questions.
Sounds good. Well, nice to be here this afternoon, and thanks for the invitation. So I'm closing in on about 30 years now in higher education. I came to California about 8 years ago. Previous to that, I had been at Cal Lutheran or Pacific Lutheran University, how easy I forget, for 18 years, and prior to that at East Tennessee State University, which is my first position out. My background is I did my doctorate in educational psychology with an emphasis in multicultural education under the guidance of Jim Banks and Geneva Gay. And so that's kind of guided me throughout my higher ed career in terms of professional interest and research, which I've been obviously engaged in for a long time. Since I arrived at Cal Lutheran, I'm the Dean of the Graduate School of Education, just finishing up my 8th year. And during those 8 years, in addition to being the dean, I also was the interim chair of our teacher education program for 2 years. Funny how leadership sometimes will do that. And that happened to also coincide with when we went through our last accreditation visit. Part of the reason why I stepped into that was because of my background in accreditation, which I know I'll get to a little bit later on one of the additional questions. But within that work, I think the work is really characterized by the work that I do in making sure that our faculty are up to date on California standards, making sure that we're adhering to what it is that is being asked of us, making sure that we are reaching out to our district partners, which is a big part of my work, making sure that I'm going out to districts and the county superintendent and all those different partners that I think are really important. A big piece most recently has been our work with the state teacher residency programs. We actually applied for 2 capacity grants. One was Santa Maria Bonita School District up on the Central Coast, and one with Simi Valley Unified School District. We received capacity grants for both of those. And we weren't ready to apply for an implementation with Simi Valley, but we did apply for one with Santa Maria, and that has actually been really one of the highlights of my higher ed career. We launched our program this spring, and in our first cohort, we have 17 candidates, all who were employed by the district. They're all students of Hispanic background and all bilingual. And so I think that when we're looking for models of how to diversify our teaching profession, I think this has been just one of the most extraordinary things. And a lot of that has depended on our partnership with the school district, which we've been building for a number of years. I've also been involved just over the last couple of years with CTC. I helped served on the consulting group that was dealing with flexibilities during the pandemic, and worked with Cheryl and Aaron quite a bit as we tried to navigate how we were going to deal with all the stresses and demands that were happening during the pandemic. And so that was a very interesting process for me. And then I've also served as a legislative consultant with AICCU Ed, which is the independent deans group within the state. So that's a kind of a brief background of some of the things that I've done over the last few years.
Great. I appreciate that. Commissioner Davis?
Good afternoon, Dr. Hillis. Good
Nice
to see you.
Yeah.
So, second question, please summarize your involvement in accreditation activities in general and share with us any experiences you have with the Commission's accreditation system.
Well, one of the things I was reflecting on is if I can see any thread in my career, ironically, it's accreditation. My first position coming out of my doctoral program when I went to Tennessee, one of the primary reasons why I was hired was because the university had not received national accreditation, primarily because they had not responded to the diversity standards within NCATE. And given that that was my background, I was asked to come in and help them do that. And so within those 3 years, I actually learned quite a bit about accreditation, kind of baptism by fire, because I had no idea about anything related to accreditation from that. But that really created a launching point. Soon after that, when I left East Tennessee to go back to the state of Washington, I was appointed to the Board of Examiners for NCATE and ended up serving on the Board of Examiners for 10 years. Tremendous work, saw just an amazing array of universities and programs and approaches towards different things. And that really helped me, I think, understand educator preparation in general, not just teacher education, but administrator, counseling, and whatnot. From that, I've also led 3 accreditation visits, and I'm getting ready for my 4th. We just submitted our preconditions, getting ready for program submissions as well, and then we have our visit in the fall of 24. So that's another big piece. Obviously, for the last 4 years, I've served on the Committee on Accreditation. It's been tremendous work. I've enjoyed it a lot. It was interesting to join the committee when the pandemic happened and changed some things and probably created a few things that I had to quickly adjust to. Overall, I think my work has served me well in the accreditation world. And actually, one of the pieces of advice that I give a lot of my young faculty members who especially have designs on becoming leaders in education is I say, you really need to get involved in accreditation work because education is a highly regulated field and you need to know your way around the world of accreditation, and it's going to serve you well when institutions are looking for people to lead them into the next 5-10 years. And so that's been a huge part of my career, and it's a part that I'm certainly very thankful for.
Thank you for that. And final question from me. As a member of the Committee on Accreditation, what do you think are the most important things to look for in making an accreditation decision for an institution?
Yeah, when I saw that question, it's a great question because as we all know, different programs approach things in different ways, and different institutions and different school districts, LEAs are located in different communities that require different responses. And as I started trying to think through that, I think the first thing that kind of really hit me is we have to have a thorough understanding of the standards in the accreditation handbook. We need to spend the time. We need to get to know the standards. This is one of the reasons why I encourage my faculty to participate in accreditation activities, because I think it helps you deeply understand and appreciate the kind of work that's before us. So that's the first thing, absolutely. The second thing is always to make sure to keep in mind that there are unique contexts and that we need to be aware that different programs, different schools are going to be under different sets of stressors and different demands on them. Doesn't take away anything from the standards. Rather, I think it just situates it. Then I think you have to, from a COA perspective, I think it's really important that you just simply understand the report that's submitted. And as part of that process, being aware of your colleagues that are sitting on that team and being clear about the questions that are being raised and asking clarifications, and then making sure that you really understand what it is. And then finally, just following the guidance of the handbook when decisions are being made. I think all those really contribute to a much more fair and equitable process.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Hillis. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
As we think about our statewide collective experience in educator preparation in the last few years, navigating the pandemic, other complex social issues, what lessons or insights should we take into the future with respect to the Commission's accreditation system?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost is I think virtual visits will no longer be the exception to the rule. As we sit here on this Zoom call, it's become very clear that we now know how to navigate this. I think the second thing is that when issues emerge statewide like they did, one of the things I was very pleased with California is when I was asked to be a part of the group that was consulting with CTC about the development of flexibilities. There's a lot of collaboration that went on, and there's a lot of clear communication that then went out to the field. And I think those two things, collaboration and then clear communication to the field, I think was one of the huge takeaways. Not that we didn't know about collaboration or clear communication pre-pandemic, but I think it reinforced how important that is. And then the final thing for me is how important it is to have deep and abiding relationships with district partners for preparation programs. For us to be able to go out to our schools and for me to talk to superintendents and say, hey, we're in this, we got to figure this out, because just like we need to have places where our folks are going to be able to go, you need those people to get through programs so that you're going to have your next generation of hires. And I think that it's just ramped up that understanding of how important those relationships are. And I think it's, for us, it really became, to fruition with our partnership with Santa Maria Bonita, which has just been one of the absolute best partnerships that I've ever had in my higher ed career.
Wonderful, thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to add that you think would be important for us to know as we consider your application?
I think just a quick reiteration. Again, I was going to say this at the end, but I started at the beginning, and that is that the thread of accreditation that runs through my career. Every time I tell in fact, when I told my wife I was interviewing today to be considered to be reappointed, she was like, why do you keep doing this? And, for me, it's always been an area ever since I was first introduced to it that just made a lot of sense for me. I do not want additional work to be put on schools and education programs. But what I do want is I want programs to be held accountable. I want them to follow standards and to make decisions on behalf of the communities in which they serve. And I think a good accreditation system, and I've been fortunate to really be in two very strong ones, both the state of Washington and California. And I see how hard people work. And it's been just, my absolute privilege to work with them and hopefully to contribute to that effort. So, thank you very much for even granting me the opportunity to be considered.
Great. Well, thank you for, again, taking the time and And I just want to make sure, even though you have experience with COA, if you have any questions for us around COA or of the commission staff.
You know, I think I'm pretty clear on the whole process, so I think we're all good.
All right. Well, thank you again for your interest and for coming today via Zoom for this phone call. And you know, the commission will be making a decision, and we have our meetings over the next couple of days. So you'll be hearing from us and seeing us often over the next couple of days via Zoom. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
So we're right on time. So we'll have Marissa Luna Lopez is next. Is she available? Because yeah, because we're a tiny bit early, maybe. She's here. Okay. Takes a bit, always. Good afternoon. Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. Thank you for joining us. I'm Commissioner Monica Martinez. Joining me for this interview are Commissioners Christopher Davis and Commissioner Shireen Pavri. Dr. Pavri is Assistant Vice Chancellor, Educator and Leadership Programs for the California State University Office of the Chancellor. And Dr. Christopher Davis is a middle school language arts teacher for Berryessa Union School District, and he also works with the National Board Resource Center at Stanford University. And he's also our liaison to the COA. We really appreciate you applying for the COA. We appreciate you taking the time to do that, and especially the time you've taken today to join us here. So as you know, we have 5 questions today, and we're going to make sure that the commissioners get to ask all of the 5 questions so you can interact with each of us on this panel. And I'll just kind of start off with the big kind of global question around this role. And just misplaced my question right there. But it is a big question. So it's we'd like to have you briefly summarize your professional experiences in education and educator preparation in California. We are interested in your teaching experiences, your work with diverse K-12 students or credential candidates, and or your issues that you especially focus on in your work. And I did forget to say we have 20 minutes. We have no problem getting through these questions in 20 minutes, but I just want to make sure I let you know that.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you for the question. I started teaching in 2003 as a teacher of students with moderate to severe disabilities, now in extensive support needs class with the County Office of Education here in Merced County. And I did that for about 4 years. In 2007, I transitioned to general education, but during that year, I was teaching in a private school, 3rd grade at an Episcopalian school here in town. And then I did student teaching at another school here in Merced County. So in the fall, I was at the private school. In the spring, doing some student teaching for multiple subjects. Then after that, from 2008 to 14, I served as a 6th through 8th grade ELA, ELD teacher. And that was at a small migrant farm work town called Planada here in Merced County. And in 2014 to 16, I transitioned to the district librarian position, and I was also a literacy coach in Planada. And then I had another little baby, and so I transitioned out of the library into a classroom. It's a lot easier to find a sub for a 2nd grade classroom than it was for the library, and so I taught 2nd grade for 3 years there. But in 2019, I was hired on with UC Merced to be an adjunct instructor in their teacher prep program and extension. And I taught a class to teacher candidates in a credentialing program on inclusive education. And from there, I was hired on to be the associate director with UC Merced. And so in that role, I was their TPA coordinator, clinical practice coordinator. I taught several classes each term. And in that role, I was part of the leadership team that took them through their 3-year site visit, their initial program site visit, which was a lot to do during the pandemic because that's kind of when that all hit. But in 2022, I transitioned to my present role here with Merced County Office of Education as a coordinator for intern programs. I was originally hired to be the coordinator for multiple subject program, but we had a transition here in our office. And so I ended up coordinating both our multiple subject and our education specialist programs. And we offer the mild, moderate support needs and the extensive support needs programs. So I've had some different roles in education, but each one of them has built on the other to be able to support me to continuing what I was doing in the classroom, outside of the classroom through my own education. I received my master's in, sorry, phone ringing here, but I will ignore that. My master's in multilingual education with Stan State, and I'm actually going to be graduating this June with my doctorate in educational leadership from UC Davis. And my area of focus is, and my dissertation title is Critical Race Counter Stories, Testimonios and Pláticas with Latina Teachers in Rural Central California. So I'm doing a closed case study on the journey from classroom or student to teacher and how folks got into the classroom.
Well, thank you for the overview, but most of all, congratulations on your work and your soon-to-be PhD. Huge feat there, wearing all these hats. So congratulations on that. And I want to pass this off to Commissioner Davis now.
Oh, welcome to the world of being a doctor. Please summarize your involvement in accreditation activities in general and share with us any experiences you have with the Commission's accreditation system.
Well, the biggest piece that I had with accreditation was the 3-year, the site visit for UC Merced. When I was hired on as the associate director, there was a different leadership team that was in place, and then that one shifted, and then the pandemic hit, and so I had to take a pretty strong role in leading our program through that site visit. It was a lot. There was a lot to learn. There were a lot of pieces that were in place, and then a lot of things that needed to be adjusted, and so that was a good lesson for me in accreditation. And after going through that experience, I became more and more interested in the accreditation process. And so I get those PSAs. I always laugh. The Friday PSA, I made it through another week. Oh, thank goodness. I see that come and I can celebrate the weekend. But I saw that they were looking for folks to evaluate dual language programs. And so I volunteered and I helped out with reviewing some dual language programs that were being added authorizations, especially in Spanish. And so, and that was a very good experience to work with other folks in distant areas, to meet and collaborate and review documents. What does this mean to you? What do you think this means? Does it meet the standard? You know, how are they doing that? And so having that conversation with someone else was really interesting. And some other things that I've done with the commission, I was working on our MCOE submitted a PK3 program, so we'll keep our fingers crossed, see how that goes. And I've been a work group member for a few different things, the PK3 ECE specialist credential. I was also a work group member for the SB 488 literacy TPE development. And I'm currently on the work group for the literacy TPA.
Thank you. And the next question, as a member of the Committee on Accreditation, what do you think are the most important things to look for in making an accreditation decision for an institution?
I think the first thing is what is the standard, right? And how is this program meeting that standard in their context? What a standard can look like can vary depending upon if you're here in, Merced County or if you're in Southern California. And so I think understanding that all programs have to respond to their candidates in that culturally responsive way is an important piece, because it's not going to look the same everywhere you go. And it really shouldn't. That's part of the flexibility. There are some things that are hard and fast rules that are, and I'm happy for those because it's very clear, but I also enjoy the flexibility that is provided to folks, and they meet the standard as long as they justify how they meet this standard. Because like I said, it's credentialing here in Merced County, as you're probably well aware of, the flooding. That first major flood that happened in January, it knocked out all of the infrastructure. We couldn't physically get from one place to another. And understanding that driving 45 minutes through, fields is part of, what we do. And so we have to have some flexibility about how we do observations. Maybe that during that time of crisis, because the commission allows for, live synchronous Zoom, or they allow for video, or they allow for in person, to have that flexibility and to have those pieces built into place. I think is very important and allows for programs to teach the students in front of them.
Thank you very much.
Right. Good afternoon, soon to be Dr. Luna Lopez. As we think about our statewide collective experience in educator preparation, especially over the last few years, navigating the pandemic and so many other social issues, what lessons or insights should we take into the future with respect to the Commission's accreditation system?
I saw this question and I thought about it a lot, because I think there's kind of like two schools of thought on this one. There's the finally we can get back to normal and go back to exactly how we did it before the pandemic and forget this and sweep it all over here and not worry about it. And then there's the other school of thought of how can we leverage what we learned and recognize that we are all going to be very different because of what happened during the pandemic. And it was one of the things that, like I said, I'm a student at UC Davis, and there were the two schools of thought with different professors and how they managed classes. And I think that that's something that we need to definitely keep in mind, is that we can't get back to normal, because we were in we had a dual pandemic that was happening. There was one of the COVID-19, and in the early days, I remember like watching the news and thinking that if I got that, I was going to die. And so I had to, we were terrified, and there was a lot of misinformation out there. But then at the same time, there was the pandemic of, systemic racism and racial injustice that was playing out in front of people. And it was a real issue that was not so intangible anymore, with the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And, it just kept happening and happening and happening. And there was a major shift in how people thought. And I feel like during the Trump administration, people were empowered. Racists were empowered to say whatever they thought. And I, myself was in the grocery store with my 6-month-old son and had a woman come up to me and tell me how cute he was, but then asked me if he was my anchor baby, keeping me in this country. And I was so shocked by that something like that had never happened to me, but she was being serious. And it's I think before the president said we could say it, people were a little bit quieter about it, but it was still there. But that made people be, gave people that believed in, I don't know, I'm sorry, it gets upsetting to me because it really did. The pandemic brought out a lot of things for teachers as well. Teachers got to see the background behind the kids. They got to see the spaces that they were in. It empowered people to say things that were negative, to discriminate against people of Asian descent because of this Chinese flu that was being called. There was a lot of those different items that were happening, and it was a very challenging time to be preparing candidates. At one point, and at UC Merced, half of our candidates were COVID positive at the same time, and so having to manage manage program standards with tired interns and tired teachers, and trying to figure out how best to meet program standards and ensure that we're preparing candidates for the classroom, but understanding that I'm preparing them for a classroom that I had never taught in because I wasn't a classroom teacher during the pandemic. So yeah, I had a bunch of notes on this and I just completely went off script. I apologize, but it's such an issue, and it's something that's coming through so clearly in my own research that the pandemic happened. There was a time where people were able to stand up and say things are wrong, and it's becoming more prevalent, and that the commission is recognizing it, even with the PK3 credential having a standard for equity. They're recognizing that this is an important piece. And I believe the Committee on Accreditation has a very strong space for that, because it's having standards for equity and ensuring that programs are teaching these things. It's going to be a very important shift in California over the next few years, to be able to welcome more students into the profession, more teachers into the profession, but also to, I guess, I'm trying to think, like I said, apologies. This one right here, I get emotional about, because it's learning to leverage what we learned in the pandemic, what we learned because of the social unrest, and not just pretending that it didn't happen and trying to get back to business as usual, because we're not in that space anymore.
Right. Thank you. Really appreciate your response. Our last question for you then is, if there's anything that you would like to add that you think would be important for us to know as we consider your application.
Yeah. Sorry about the rambling answer for the last one, but I'm a kind of person who tries to say yes before I say no. And so in looking at how programs meet standards, I try to look for it instead of just writing it off as being something that's not happening. Accreditation is scary for people. Losing accreditation, having to come to meetings and present, it's a very high stress situation. And so I think that having a kind face in it and kind words for folks is important. And so I think that it, just like when dealing with a parent-teacher conference and such, it's a high anxiety space. And so I try to do what I can to be welcoming and recognize that I'm in that space as well, because I have to work to accreditation in our program. And like I said earlier, I really enjoy that there are flexibilities for programs to do things in a way that makes sense for their context. I think that that's definitely important. And I went through and I read the accreditation frameworks, and I take that role very seriously. It's an important space. It's an important opportunity to work with programs and to ensure that we are doing what we can to support getting teachers and getting administrators and getting librarians and getting all these different folks prepared in programs that meet the needs of the classroom of today.
Great, thank you so much. We're a little short on time, but we have about a minute, and I wonder if you have any questions for us or for the commission staff.
I know we only have a minute, but what would a commissioner, a strong commissioner in this space look like?
We like to have our liaison cover these questions.
Oh, thank you.
Well, a strong commissioner in this role would be a strong commissioner in this role. And what I mean by that is someone who has the breadth of experience in higher ed or in K-12, who has a distinct interest in accreditation. I like to say that I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to accreditation and the processes, and I have been since I was on a WASP committee when I was a high school senior, believe it or not. And so I've had this keen interest since then. And I think that if you have the gift, we won't call it a nerd, but if you have the gift and you really are invested in the future of the children of California, our teacher supply, our educator supply in general, and just really improving some of the areas, like you said, the DEI and higher ed and preparation institutions, then this is the best committee for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So it sounds like you have to be nerd. Is that what you're saying? Okay. All right. Just wanted to be clear and just cut right through that. So, all right. Well, again, thank you for your time and your interest and for applying. And as you know, we'll be meeting today and over the next couple of days. So you'll see plenty of us and hear from us. So thank you again.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Bye.
So then our next person is Allison Leggett, and we're a couple of minutes behind. So is she available? Okay. And this is for higher education. Yeah. Hi there. Can you hear us and see us okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
wonderful. Great. Okay. It's always, you never know about Zoom, right? So I'm Commissioner Monica Martinez. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and thank you for applying. I am joined by two other commissioners who are on this panel, and we have, I'd like to get their titles completely correct. We have Commissioner Christopher Davis, and we have Commissioner Shireen Pavri. Dr. Pavri is the Assistant Vice Chancellor, Educator and Leadership Programs for the California State University at the Office of the Chancellor. Dr. Christopher Davis is a middle school language arts teacher for the Berryessa Union School District, and he also works with the National Board Resource Center at Stanford University. He's also our liaison to the Committee on Accreditation, and Dr. Pavri is our liaison for higher education. So again, just want to thank you for applying to be a member of the COA. As you know, we're going to ask you 5 questions today. I'll ask the first question, and then Commissioner Davis will take the next 2, and Commissioner Pavri will take the final 2. And we have 20 minutes, and we'd love to give time for you to be able to ask us any questions at the end of this interview. And so with that, I will start with just kind of a high-level question, which just asks you to summarize your professional experiences in education and educator preparation in California. We're, of course, interested in your teaching experiences, your work with diverse K-12 students or credential candidates, and or issues that you are especially focused on in your work.
Well, thank you all so much for your time today. I am so honored to be able to be interviewed for the higher education appointment in the Commission for Accreditation. This is my 38th year in teacher education. It's hard to believe that it seems like just yesterday, I was a teacher assistant in an early education program. And that followed up several years later, of course, in teaching mathematics and science in the high school level. I ultimately worked as a school administrator and district administrator. However, I wanted to make a stronger impact on teacher education. So I had the wonderful opportunity to teach teacher education courses starting in 2003. And from there, I thought, oh my gosh, I absolutely love the bigger impact that I'm making in teacher education. So within the teacher education realm, having started as a adjunct faculty member, I ultimately became a credential analyst working with teacher candidates, as well as a, depending on the university, was either fieldwork coordinator or university supervisor coordinator. So I worked to place wonderful teacher candidates into placements, not only within Southern California, but actually in remote positions across the state. And that ultimately led to my current position as the Director of Teacher Education at UCLA Extension, where I make an even broader impact on teacher candidates. Some of our programs include teacher induction, career and technical education, K-12 methodology courses, as well as the U.S. Constitution exam and the CTEL CLAD add-on credential. So I oversee a multitude of programs within teacher education and absolutely love it. However, I've also, over the years, starting when I became a high school teacher, have worked in an advisory role with the state, either for curriculum or for English language learners, or very specifically, I worked as an advisor for chemistry, very specifically for the state. So I absolutely love just the idea of volunteering in the bigger sense for the state of California. So that is in my blood. I do want to continue that work. And I think serving on this board, the Commission for Accreditation, will serve that really well. I'd like to emphasize very specifically for the teacher induction program, how I'm a real passionate person and real passionate director for just-in-time work and support for our teacher candidates. And also within the state of California, as well as throughout the nation, due to the teacher shortage, I'm quite passionate about serving school districts in order to make them make UCLA Extension available to them, and making the idea of the add-on credential, for instance, a viable option for teacher candidates, so that these school districts can meet those goals of filling positions. So when we talk about my work with diverse students, it actually comes from both the experience where I was a high school teacher and administrator, as well as in teacher education in my current role. So within my teaching, I worked not only with the students in underserved communities, such as Inglewood and in some areas in Los Angeles Unified School District. I also have experience working in some private schools, as well as in the higher school districts, such as Beverly Hills Unified School District. So I've worked with the diverse students, I've worked with diverse learners, and what I found out is one common goal, that they want to learn. They really do want to learn. So as teachers and teacher educators, what I do in my programs is find out what is that learning? How do we get to the students in order to ensure that they learn? In my, for an example, in the teacher induction program, we want to cultivate really classroom experiences that better support our students that are in marginalized communities. We cannot emphasize that enough, that that's needed across the state of California.
Thank you so much.
And I have the next question. Good afternoon. Please summarize your involvement in accreditation activities in general and share with us any experiences you have with the Commission's accreditation system.
So within this 38 years and maybe 20 years in higher education, I'm quite familiar, of course, with the California Standards for the Teacher Profession, capsules, the TPEs, the CAPE standards, the Common Standards, and Program Standards. I've served a number of committees for various universities to actually support and get the materials ready for accreditation. And then more recently, I served as a board of institutional reviewer, and I was so happy with that opportunity to work directly with the state to support the preliminary administrative services credential as well as the clear administrative services credential. In addition to the work that I've done serving to support schools, obviously I continue to volunteer as much as I can on any ad hoc committees in relation to, for instance, the new Cal TPA for ed specialists or any other element that the state will need support in.
Thank you very much. And the next question, as a member of the Committee on Accreditation, what do you think are the most important things to look for in making an accreditation decision for an institution?
I thought, you know, being on the board of institutional reviewers, it really opens your eyes, having been on both sides and knowing that the standards are there. The reviewers are there to really identify how well an institution matches to those standards. And I found that having seen so many universities in my lifetime, that I think in the role on the Commission of Accreditation, it is quite important to be fair. It is very, very important to be fair and impartial, but also take a look at equity. And when we look at equity, we want to ensure that that balance of being fair and impartial is there. So when I say that, I think of the rural district that is trying to get accreditation, sometimes limited resources. And we don't want to look and see that in comparison to another school district that may have more resources, this is what occurred. Instead, we look at a very fair, impartial, and the rubric for actually taking a look at how well the standards were met. And we do understand that it is a committee that looks at it, but I feel in the committees that I've been a part of that my greatest talent and passion is to look at it through the equity lens. I received some training through Cornell University for their diversity, equity, and inclusion certificate. And I feel that that training, even though it came somewhat later in my career, was very effective in really taking a look and going to the bare bones of whatever the standard is or whatever the project would be in order to ensure that impartial and that fair judgment in terms of what we're looking for accreditation.
Thank you very much for your responses.
Good afternoon, Dr. Leggett. As we think about our statewide collective experience in educator preparation in the last few years, navigating the pandemic, complex social issues, what lessons or insights should we take into the future with respect to the Commission's accreditation system?
I've thought long and hard about that, especially during the pandemic, during a time in which I worked, for instance, in supporting students in clinical practice, and all of a sudden, suddenly, schools were shut down. I think I was in a better position to support those students because I was already trained in online teaching. I was a fully trained and certified, officially certified online learning teacher. I was able to more so turn on a dime and advise my students and various schools on how perhaps observations could happen in an environment that was really shut down. So I believe that was helpful for me to have had that background. So when I think about outside of my own work that I've done, and I really think long and hard about what could happen in the future, definitely there are those that are really strong with technology and those that aren't as strong. I think many schools decided to create a system that was more fully technology, and the world just wasn't ready for that. So I would want to say, in terms of preparation and lessons that we've learned, I would say that we really need to understand and really own or take a better ownership of the various methods of teaching that happen. So if in fact schools aren't as well versed in technology because of the pandemic, that really came to the surface, I think that schools need to better understand that, and therefore the teachers need to be trained on that. And therefore, ultimately, we need to look at where that fits in. And that's just, of course, if there is, another shutdown in the future. But I also want to say that we need to develop a better system for handling drastic changes or major paradigm shifts that happen. So the lessons that I have would be, let's all recognize that there must be additional or alternative plans in place. And that much like schools have a fire drill, there should be drills or there should be opportunities for additional training in case a particular system doesn't work. For instance, if, the 5-day-a-week system of teachers being, there, 6.5 or 7.5 hours a day, if that doesn't work, there should be this plan for this alternative that could happen. And I just think overall that should be across the state, that would be a plan that we have to not necessarily plan for something going wrong, but definitely plan for something going differently. Much like having a teaching in a single subject classroom and teaching a higher level of mathematics, a lot of times teachers don't plan for having a student who has special needs because they feel, well, special needs may not necessarily fit into a higher level math class. And they're absolutely, not thinking about what special needs really is. It doesn't mean that they are not able to understand. It just means that they understand differently. So that same type of training, I think that we do for our teachers, for the special education, we need to kind of set up systems to say, okay, well, this is the way it has been. What happens if there is a change? And that little bit of change that can happen will prepare us, I think, for the future.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like for us to know or that you would think would be important for us to know as we consider your application?
Yes, just to share that I think we all recognize longevity in education is a real talent and it must be a real passion. So from my early days in, I'll say, early childhood education, where I worked as a teacher aide and absolutely loved working with those students. I mean, I just absolutely loved it. To this day, where I'm at the realm of really overseeing various programs, I'm really touching so many levels of education. I absolutely love volunteering for the state. It is such a great passion of mine. I also work on other committees outside of my work at UCLA, Infinity's Community Solutions, where I serve on the board in order to help support underserved schools for STEM education. I'm just so passionate about that work that you often think about, well, what would you like to do? How do you see yourself? And I just want to share that I actually see myself on this committee, and I hope that you do as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for your interest in being of service, a public servant to California at large. And we'll be meeting today, and then of course the commission meets over the next 2 days, so we'll be in touch with you shortly. But can't be any more grateful for your interest and time that you've taken in applying for this role with our COA. Oh, but I forgot.
Thank you so much.
I gave you all these things. I forgot to give you a chance, though. Did you have a question for us? My deepest apologies. Do you have a question for us?
Oh, no, I just wanted to share my background, but thank you so much.
Okay. You bet. All right. Thank you again so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. We're still forging forward. It's a little bit after 4:10. Do we have Malika? Not yet. Okay. Well, it's strangely encouraging when I see the Zoom with the line across. Like, it means somebody must be trying to call in. Never knew a negative sign would be so good. Malika, there's you. Malika. Yeah. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's quite okay. Can you see and hear us okay?
I can. Yeah. I've never done this
wonderful.
before in my car. So
There's always a first for something when it comes to Zoom and post-pandemic, right?
exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I am Commissioner Monica Martinez, and joining me on the interview panel are Commissioners Christopher Davis and Shireen Pravri. Dr. Pravri is an Assistant Vice Chancellor, Educator and Leadership Programs for California State University at the Office of the Chancellor. Dr. Christopher Davis is a middle school language arts teacher for the Berryessa Union School District and also works with the National Board Resource Center at Stanford University. Dr. Pravri is our liaison for higher education, and Dr. Davis is our liaison to COA. And we're going to ask you about 5 questions, as you know, and we'd like to leave time for you to be able to ask us any questions. And just want to again thank you for taking the time to call in, especially from your car. And we have about 20 minutes for this, and usually we don't take the full time, so I'm sure it'll be great. So I'm going to start with the first question. It's just going to be a high level question, and then Commissioner Davis is going to ask 2 questions, and then Commissioner Pravri is going to ask 2 questions, and then we'd love to give you time to ask a question if you want to. Certainly not required. So my question is just really kind of the big opening overview question, and we'd love to hear from you a summary of your professional experiences in education and educator preparation in California. We're interested in your teaching experiences, your work with diverse K-12 students or credential candidates, and issues that you're especially focused on in your work.
Sure. Okay. So I was a classroom teacher for 14 years. I taught 5th grade. I taught kindergarten. I spent the bulk of my time in kindergarten, which was a huge surprise to me because I had no intention of teaching young children, but I found that I actually really enjoyed it. And so then I got into mentoring new teachers through the BITSA program, and I became a lead in my district doing that work and providing training and really providing opportunities for working with adults, which I had not done up to that point. And so I was teaching simultaneously while coordinating the mentoring aspects of the BITSA program way back when. And then I transferred to the county office, the Kern County Superintendent of Schools, where I became a program specialist, where then I worked with the 50 plus partners that the county office has with the BITSA program, then transferring to the induction program, and really worked with rural districts, large districts, every size you can think of, because there were 47 districts in the county at that time. There are 46 now, and they encompass every variety you can think of in terms of demographics and location, and rural, small, medium, large, everything in between. So that was a really great experience for me and very eye-opening, coming from a one school system to a very larger opportunity to provide support and kind of differentiate that support across the school districts. And then I became the coordinator of the program. And then now I am the Director of Educator Development for the Superintendent of Schools, which encompasses both the Teacher Induction Program and the Clear Administrative Services Credential Program, which I've run directly, but also several other programs, which includes the UPK support for the 42 districts that have transitional kindergarten, and the mixed delivery system with our California State preschool programs, AmeriCorps mentors. The bulk of my career has really been, in the last 15 years, centered around providing support for the adults so that students are better off, because we've been doing this work, and really centering around the best practices there, credentialing, mentoring, that sort of thing.
Thank you so much for that summary and overview of your work.
Sure.
Good afternoon. I have the next two questions to ask of you.
Oh no, my car just turned itself off. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear us?
Barely. I think that's because I had you on my speaker. Oh, this is good times right here.
I'll give you a moment.
Okay, there we go. I got you on speaker. We're fine.
Oh, okay. Here are the next two questions.
Alrighty.
The first, please summarize your involvement in accreditation activities in general, and share with us any experiences you have with the Commission's accreditation system.
Okay. I have pretty extensive experience across the board from the old system where we had biennial reports and that sort of thing. But really, when we became the system of getting BIR trained and going out and providing assistance and reviews to other programs. So I can't even count how many teams I've been a part of. And I have to say it's been one of the most valuable components that has informed my work as a program leader, going and seeing how other districts and other programs apply their work. And, you know, you can have the same set of standards, and there are multiple pathways to accomplishing those standards in a local context, which I always find very gratifying. I have been involved in program review. I've been involved in common standards review. I have been out on site visits, both virtual and in person. And I'm going to be I'm signed up to be team lead. So every aspect of that process in terms of reviewing for others, and of course, leading my team in our own site visit as well. I've gone through that process twice for our programs internally.
Okay, thank you. And
sure.
My final question, not the final question, as a member of the Committee on Accreditation, what do you think are the most important things to look for in making an accreditation decision for an institution?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that one is ultimately that they are using the structure that's provided to them, the sets of standards for whichever programs they have, as a resource for providing support and guidance for the teachers they serve or the individuals they serve, and that ultimately they're using that lens to serve the students that we're all responsible to. And so recognizing that there's local context that can provide that there are multiple approaches that programs can have, but at the same time, there's structure with flexibility in terms of of how they get there, and that they are informed enough about what those structures are that they can explain the how and the why of how they've designed what they've created and the why behind their design, and also that they can describe the impact behind the choices they've made.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Good afternoon, Ms. Bryant. Adaptability is the name of the game. You're doing great. Hopefully you can continue to hear us. All right. So as we think about our statewide collective experience in educator preparation over the past few years, navigating the pandemic and so many complex social issues, what lessons or insights should we take into the future with respect to the Commission's accreditation system?
Wow, that's a really big question. But I think that if we really look at how the level of adaptation that people have demonstrated, the level of flexibility that people have demonstrated, we can take that and we can celebrate it and we can build on it. And I think that one of the most important things we can do is take people from where they are, meet them where they are, and then lead them toward where the path toward where they'd like to be going and where we can help facilitate that process. And what I mean by that is, local context always informs the structure of what's created, but also the individual experiences frame that, and the stress levels that people are under also frame the amount of bandwidth and energy they have to apply toward things. And being aware of all of that and recognizing that people are in different places, but we are also really taking time to attend to all of those aspects that engage us in our work, because this is big work. We are really, to me, the purpose of the work of the COA and the work of credentialing programs and of teaching in general, it's really about building capacity, and it's about expanding the capacity of the people around you. So when you look at what we learned from the pandemic, there are universal lessons, and then there are individual lessons as well. So for me, I think the biggest piece is looking at a structure with flexibility. It's kind of been my big mantra since COVID. We have to have structure. We have to know where we're going. We have to know where we've been, and we have to be able to discuss the how and the why of what's been created and the impact. But we also have to be able to adjust as things happen that were unanticipated, which happens every day on small scale and occasionally on large scales as well. And I think our systems need to have space for those adjustments. We can't be so rigid that we don't allow programs to create adjustments and explain how they've gotten there within the structure that's been created for them.
Wonderful, thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to add that you think would be important for us to know as we consider your application?
Yeah, there's just a couple of things in terms of the work that I've done that maybe I didn't mention earlier, and that I was on the CSTP refresh work group, which was probably some of the most meaningful and exciting work that I've done as a group, and I'm still waiting to get rolled out. But then the pandemic happened, right? And that's life. I was also part of the group that launched the inaugural couple of induction conferences in the Central Valley. We just decided there was a need, and we made it happen. And that tends to be the kind of people I hang out with, and the work that I tend to do. I also worked with the Commission on the exit survey group, that we created new exit surveys for candidates once they were once they earn their or apply for their credential. But I think the big thing for me is that there's this concept that I really try to approach in all the work that I do, and that's transactional versus transformational, and recognizing that there's much of the work that we do requires transactional structures. You know, we need to have lists, we need to have processes, we need to have structure, we need to have components that guide people on what to do. But those, to me, the importance of those transactional components are so that we can get to the transformational. And it's really important that we don't get bogged down in the transactional and miss out on those transformational moments, because ultimately at the end of the day, we are all here to do the work that serves the students across the state. And that requires us to be innovative. It requires us to think creatively. It requires us to do things differently than we've done them before. And it requires us to communicate and collaborate with one another at a high level. And that, to me, when I'm in groups where that's happening, and there's that synergy, that is the best part of my work, and the part that brings me the greatest joy and makes me feel very, very fortunate that I'm in the realm that I'm in and that I get to do the work that I do every day.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thank you for doing this from your car. And we have a couple of minutes. Do you have any questions for us around, you know, anything around the COA, anything for the commission staff? We're here to answer your questions as well.
Okay, I guess one of my questions would be time commitment. Let's say we move forward. If we move forward, is there, and also like training, is there a level of training and that happens for new COA members so that, you know, that's those structures are there and they feel comfortable and competent in doing their work?
Hi there. I think I can answer that if you want. We do an orientation with our with the COA, new COA members, you know, to how the committee works, some general responsibilities. You become, you know, subject to, you know, conflict of interest laws, then things like that. So we do several hours of orientation. We have a handbook for new COA members. That kind of thing. But and the time commitment, we have approximately 7 meetings a year, and mostly a big chunk of those are in the spring.
Okay. All right. Well, no, I think, you know, the thing for me,
I think they want to answer your question.
Oh, okay.
The
Sorry,
commission staff. Yeah,
I just wanted to add one more thing, because rules were waived for meeting purposes during COVID, but the COA now is back to being required to meet in person. So the meetings do happen here in Sacramento at the commission offices, that 6 or 7 times a year. And they're typically 2-day meetings. Sometimes they're 1 day.
Okay. I mean, that's about what I thought. So, and I'll be honest, I have a lot on my plate, but what I have on my plate, I love, and anything that I can do to expand the thinking and the opportunities and the work, I'm all for. So.
Well, thank you very much. And with that, thank you for your interest. Thank you for your time. Thanks for your questions. Thank you for taking the time to share your perspectives and your experience with us. And we'll be in touch over the next couple of days.
Sounds good. You have a great day. Thank you.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. This is wild. We're actually a couple minutes early. Yeah, 4:30. We're 1 minute. Yeah, we're 2 minutes early. Okay. Hi there. How are you doing? I'm Commissioner Martinez, and thank you for joining us today. And most of all, thank you for applying for this role in the COA. Joining me on the interview panel are Commissioners Christopher Davis and Shireen Pavri. Dr. Pavri is Assistant Vice Chancellor, Educator and Leadership Programs for California State University, Office of the Chancellor. Dr. Christopher Davis is a middle school language arts teacher for the Berryessa Union School District, and he also works with the National Board Resource Center at Stanford University. Dr. Davis is our liaison to COA, and Dr. Pavri is our liaison to higher education. Thanks again for applying to be a member of the COA. As you know, we're going to ask 5 questions. I'll start off with the first question, just kind of high-level overview, and then then Dr. Davis will follow, and then Dr. Pavri. And we hope that and I'm sure there will be time for you to ask us any questions that you might have about COA. And Dr. Davis can answer as our liaison, or we have commission staff who can help answer as well. So with that, I will go ahead and just kind of start with the high-level overview question about your work, and would love to hear from you about your professional experiences in education, if you could summarize those. And then we're also interested in hearing about your teacher experiences, your work with diverse K-12 students or credential candidates, and issues that you're currently focused on in your own work.
My apologies. It was a pleasure to meet all of you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you this afternoon. My name is Patrick McKee, and currently I serve as the Director of Induction, but I want to go a little bit back in time. This is my 26th year in education. So I actually started off as an elementary school teacher 26 years ago. And the school I worked at was a very diverse population of students. And so as a teacher, my experience is just figuring out how to best differentiate instruction to support the needs of all learners, second language learners, students with disabilities, gifted and talented education, and all students that I was there to support. And as a classroom teacher, I also had the opportunity to be a home hospital teacher, and I also had the opportunity to be a CBET instructor, so teaching at nighttime to parents, teaching them English after school. And those experiences all culminated as a teacher. I was awarded the San Bernardino County Medal of Honor for Excellence in Education. And after that, earned my master's in educational administration and secured a job as an assistant principal at an international studies magnet school. And the population of students there, a significant number of students who are English language learners as well, high socioeconomically disadvantaged students. So it was really a great opportunity to be able to extend what I learned as a teacher and apply that over as an administrator. In the same district, I also became a principal. Similar population of students. And the unique opportunity there was when I became a principal for the first time, they were in program improvement status year 5. If you remember how the system was back then with NCLB. And really working with the staff. When I started there, 3% of the students in 3rd grade were proficient, and figuring out what can we do to really differentiate our instructions to support all learners, and even bringing in different opportunities like power time, where kids were put into groups based upon ability, and then figuring out what we can base with our instructional practices to move them to that next level. And we, over 6 years, were able to improve our API by 132 points, and we successfully exited program improvement. So that was my experience as a principal. And then I moved to another school district with a very different population of students. It was a very high performing school, very high parent involvement. And so what we focused on at that school actually was, how do we close the achievement gap? So we still had a lot of diversity within our students, but we wanted to make sure that we're providing equitable education. That school site, the work that we did, we were able to actually become a Gold Ribbon award-winning school for our literacy program, as well as a Golden Bell award-winning school. And I think that just really helps to show just my experience in working with diverse students, working with adults, and that led to my current position, which is from that same district as the Director of Induction. This is a consortium program that I oversee. So although I'm employed in one district, we actually support 8 school districts with teacher induction and administrator induction. So it's across the Los Angeles region, from Baldwin Park all the way out to Upland Unified. And in this role, I'm in charge of professional development, everything related to accreditation, the mentors, the coaches, the training pieces there. And then in this role, also, I'm the co-chair for Cluster 4, which is the LA Region of Induction Directors. On the side, just for fun, I know one of you on the panel is a university instructor. I love teaching. It's in my heart and my soul. So I also have experience teaching in the preliminary services program for teachers and administrators, and as well as in the gifted and talented education program, teaching current educators how to build curriculum and classroom management, and international educators. So it's kind of a quick summary. Everything else is kind of on the resume, but really I'm committed to education and the betterment of our systems for all students.
Thank you for sharing that.
Good afternoon. And actually, there are 2 of us on the panel that teach instructors at university level.
Excellent.
And I have a couple of questions for you. And the first one is, please summarize your involvement in accreditation activities in general, and share with us any experiences you have with the Commission's accreditation system.
So I want to kind of look at this for two different levels. I do a lot of work with the commission as well as my current job. So I want to speak to my current job first. So as the director of induction, I oversee all aspects of the accreditation for our program. So I do for example, input and take the data for the ADS annually and also analyze it and bring that data to our constituent groups to look at ongoing program development. That's a part of my job. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the co-chair for Cluster 4, which is all the LA region induction directors. And part of my responsibilities, and it's actually tomorrow, I have an annual training. I actually train all the leaders how to use ADS, how to find the completer documents and the data there, and how to best be able to utilize that when you're working with your constituent groups. I also, as a program director, after a year being in this job as a teacher induction program, I was asked to write an administrator induction program. So I understand the process from writing a program, from initial program review, implementing everything that the state needed for that full accreditation for administrator induction program, just in time to go through the complete site visit process for our teacher induction program, which they connected with our administrator induction program. So submitting the preconditions, common standards, program standards, and just this January, we were able to get a full accreditation for both our administrator induction and our teacher induction program. So that's a little bit of the accreditation pieces there. As work with the commission, I am BIR trained. So I have also worked on program review. So I've done the initial program standards, the common standards, and the initial program review rather, and the program standards, and being as a member of a representative of the commission on those pieces behind the scenes, and doing the representative of the commission on site visits. So I've conducted site visits both at the university level as well as at the district level, both through the lens of a program standard review as well as a common standard review. So that just is the wealth of experience. So kind of a side note to that, a couple of years ago, I was a member of the CSTP refresh work group. So that as well is a piece of just the standards related to what we're implementing in the teacher induction program.
Thank you for that information. And the next question we've got for you is, as a member of the Committee on Accreditation, what do you think are the most important things to look for in making an accreditation decision for an institution?
I think really the most important thing is process. The whole piece of why this accreditation came together, in my understanding, is making sure we have an equitable process to ensure that we have effective educator preparation programs in place in the state of California. So I think that one of the most important things to take a look at, what was the process? How was it followed? So did they make sure they followed all the guidelines set forth by the commission? Do we have enough voices involved, the constituent groups, that they were able to get different lenses and different perspectives through the different visits as they created their report? And making sure that, with all the guidelines followed, that whatever's being presented out, there is that backing of information from multiple data points, not just single data points. With that being said, I think it's also important to trust the team. The team was in the field. The team is highly trained. Knowing that as a BIR member, like, we go through the training, they train us ahead of time. There's so many conversations that happen, and it's a very collaborative process with the program. But I think it's also important to trust the team and knowing that they did a lot of work. They are the ones that read all the paperwork. They're the ones that interviewed everybody that was there. They have the greater knowledge of the program. So it's important to put that level of trust there. With that in mind, trust the team, but also be aware that we're going to have perspectives on the Committee on Accreditation. We're going to have questions. We're going to have wonderings based upon what's presented. And at that moment, I think it's so important to acknowledge and recognize our own bias. And when I first became an assistant principal, mentor told this to me, and I've never forgotten it. Just because it's not the way we would do it doesn't mean it's wrong. And so what we need to do is, we're reading the reports and seeing what's coming our way, is to evaluate, is this the way I would do it? Well, but does it still meet the standard? Then we're good. If it doesn't meet the standard, or if we feel that we have questions, don't come from a lens of judgment, come from a lens of wondering, come from a lens of questioning, to be able to seek more knowledge, and being aware that if I think of a different perspective, that's when I need to acknowledge my bias at that moment. Instead of judging, ask those questions, be curious about maybe some different pieces, so that I can be able to provide the most authentic decision on my part. And when it comes to making a decision, being very clear that I was with a very open ear, that there's something I had a wondering about, I gave them the fair opportunity to ask the question and get that response. And that's what I do on a site visit team. I want them to be able to succeed. So before I make any decisions, I always ask questions and make sure is there anything I'm missing on this? Because in my lens, everyone's working as hard as they can. And if something really isn't there, we need to really utilize the systems in place, but we also don't want to make mistakes along the way either.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So as we think about our statewide collective experience in educator preparation over the past few years, navigating a pandemic, pretty significant social complex issues, what lessons or insights should we take into the future with respect to the Commission's accreditation system?
I love this question because I think about March 2020 and everything we knew about education prior to March 2020 certainly has changed. And we certainly have learned a lot, but I also want to say that we have so much still to learn. I think we had this big learning opportunity in the last couple of years that really opened up an opportunity for a lot of conversations and really taking a look at everything that we are doing as educators, and especially in the role of Committee on Accreditation, what are we doing to support with educator prep? So one of the things I think is so important is we can't lose sight of our beacon. Our beacon is our standards. So we got to make sure that we're still taking a look at the standards that are in place and making sure education preparation programs are following that level of standards. But we also need to layer onto that is that level of flexibility that right now, programs are implementing ways that are like unheard of, the things we haven't seen before, Zoom meetings and virtual settings. And we went from paper documents to electronic documents, and we're always learning and we're always growing. So as we go into any of these processes, really going with an open mind to say that we're still learning on how to become the best for today's classroom, because today's classroom is still ever evolving. But what does that mean that we need to do from an accreditation standpoint? I think we really need to tap into, and we did this a lot with the CSTP refresh work group, the SEL needs of the educator and of the student. Because our educators are facing so much in the classroom today, there's so many different nuances of their positions that really have become challenges. And how are we as institutions supporting the SEL needs of the educators? Because if we're not supporting their SEL needs, they're not going to be a best support for our students. And that's what we're here for. We're here to make sure the students have everything they need. And we want their SEL needs to be met as well. So I think as we look at program data, as we're asking questions through ADS or asking questions through site visits, what are we doing and how are we hearing that we're supporting our candidates as whole people and as educators? And how are they supporting their students as whole people and as educators? Because in the end, we really have one opportunity to teach our teachers to be the best teachers possible or best educators possible. And they have one opportunity that year to be the best teacher possible for their students. So our window is very small on both of those ends. So just continuing to evolve, adapt, and making sure we're meeting the needs of today's classroom.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else that you would like to add that you think would be important for us to know as we review your application?
With this, first of all, I want to thank you again for the opportunity. When I saw this opportunity come up, it really resonated with me because I'm always trying to do something more to be a best service for educators and for students. And really, I see being a member of the COA is such a gift in that you get to support the ongoing effective educator preparation programs for the state of California. I've been a teacher, I've been a principal, I've been a director, I've been involved with so many different layers of support of educators. And to be able to be at that level of support, that's why I applied. And I wanted to share with you why I applied to just go to that next level and to be able to support and serve at an even higher level. So just to really make that impact, because our new teachers are going to be in the field for 30 more years and they're impacting students who are going to become teachers. So the opportunity there to make a change in the society and the world is so great. And I just thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today and for the opportunity to speak with you about my experiences. And I don't have anything else to share, or if there's anything else you would like me to share, I'm more than happy to answer any additional questions.
No, but all thanks goes to you. We appreciate your interviewing with us. But do you have any questions for us?
At this time, my only question kind of maybe about process, like from today forward, what's the process the commission is utilizing for this selection?
Yeah, I think commission staff will have you guys.
Friday morning. Hi, yeah, this is Erin Sullivan from
Hi,
Professional
Erin.
Services. Hi. So the ad hoc committee will deliberate following your interview and make some decisions, which will then be announced publicly at the end of the commission meeting on Friday when we reconvene general session at the end of the meeting. So there's an agenda item there. So the choice will be made and announced by this Friday.
Thank you so much. That was my only curiosity point, but thank you, Erin, so much for sharing that. And to all of you, thank you for taking the time today to meet with all of us.
All right. Well, thanks for doing this at the end of your day, and have a really good evening.
All right. You as well. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that concludes our interviews, and I suggest a comfort break. And thank you everyone for, I don't know, 2 hours and almost 3 hours of sitting in one place and asking and hearing our candidates. So big decisions coming up. Let's take a break. If we're small enough, we'll just see when we come back. We will be back at 4:55. Convene our ad hoc committee, and we're going to start with some discussion. I should probably read my script to be less informal, but our role today is to make a recommendation to the full commission on Friday. So we ourselves don't make the decision, but we will take the recommendation to the larger commission. So let me just check here. Yeah, I mean, I think I just can't thank the applicants enough, and just so grateful for the willingness to serve on the committee on accreditation, and to have 8 applicants is just, I don't know if that's common, but I was surprised and thrilled to have that kind of interest. And so we're going to discuss the K-12 applicants, and then I'll call for the motion. So the only thing I will kick off is just kind of what I said is to have that much interest in the diversity of experience from across the state, but a real yearning to ensure that the standards are used for our accreditation process, and the real desire to be of public service as we continue to recruit our educators and ensure that we have quality programs and that we produce quality educators. I was just really inspired by all of them, and that's kind of my overall big comment and discussion. So this is where we get to the hard part, because all of them are amazing, and all of them had really great reasons for wanting to be on this committee, and all of them had very diverse experiences that they could offer. So I open it up to my 2 colleagues to see who would like to talk about what. Okay, it looks like Commissioner Davis is deferring to you to start.
So we're just to clarify, we're starting with the K-12.
Yeah, we need to start with the K-12.
Yes? Okay, all right, sounds good. So I am going back to the instructions we were given in terms of thinking through, just like Commissioner Martinez said, I was extremely impressed by each and every one of the candidates, and I so appreciate their rich expertise and their willingness to continue to volunteer and give their time to continue to enhance educational outcomes for our young people in the state. So
we may have scared them away when we told them it was 6 or 7 meetings.
I think most seem to think know that, yeah. So we have some guidance in terms of moving us forward, in terms of finding a balance between the current members who sit on the Committee on Accreditation and the new members that we're looking to bring in. And so I was taking copious notes when you all were guiding us through that. We have a lot of Southern California members, so we're looking for geographic diversity, so looking for more folk from the Central Valley and the Northern California regions. We're looking for, it sounds like we will have 6 continuing male and 3 continuing female members, and so looking for more, again, gender diversity. Again, we have 1 African American and 2 Latino commissioners, and the rest are Caucasian, so looking for some diversity on that ground. We certainly do need a UC representative because we have 2 from the CSU and 2 from the privates, and then we have room for still one more IHE person. And we had folk from school districts, we have folk from county offices, we have folk from on the higher ed side from both extended ed as well as from and also in different roles. So assistant deans, associate deans, dean. I think we already have some sitting faculty members, right, on the commission. So
I think what was interesting,
Sorry, I was looking
I think from the K-12 side, I'm not sure we had a classroom teacher.
do we have
right?
an existing classroom teacher?
Yeah, we do on the
We do,
commission.
right,
We do.
yeah, but none of
Yeah,
the.
we have a couple,
right.
actually. I think we have
Yeah.
2. But I was, but we had district
Jerry,
and
like
county.
one.
I think,
Yes,
is that right?
that is correct. There were no candidates this time who were sitting classroom teachers.
Mhm.
However, I did want to remark about the breadth of experience that all of the candidates presented with today and the candor with which they expressed that. I was overwhelmed with being impressed by so much experience, so much dedication to our students and to bettering California's education community. It was an amazing experience to be on this committee today. I'm just inspired by the dedication of each of these educators as they came and shared how they started as a kindergarten teacher or a special education teacher or started, working in early childhood education and then worked all the way through and beyond working in a classroom. And a lot of our candidates started with induction and then had served on so many different focus groups for the commission, work groups for the commission. I was just like, wow. Being new to the commission myself, being new to the Committee on Accreditation, I didn't know all of these opportunities were available. Otherwise, I probably would have tried to throw my hat in the ring for some of these opportunities in the past. I just didn't know in my own little world. But to see so many accomplished professionals in the field was very impressive today. And to know that we don't typically have 8 and we had 8, this is a very difficult decision. When it comes to our K-12 professionals, I know Ms. Sheldon, Ms. Luna Lopez, Ms. Bryant, and Mr. McKee presented with excellent credentials and background, and again, a breadth of experience. There were some things that each of these candidates had in common, again, that breadth of experience. And the one factor that some of these candidates possessed was that DIR training and some more advanced experience as far as working with accreditation in their own LEA or in their own county office, or in one case, a consortium, which, was kind of similar in that LEA configuration because of the LCAP and the LCFF. But again, aside from that, all had some great experience as far as this goes. So just wanted to throw that out there before we start any kind of deliberation of any kind. So.
Yeah, I agree. And I also, and then we should get really specific about the candidates, but I also appreciated the recognition of the question that you asked around COVID, what that meant, and also was inspired about how that has kind of forward and propelled their own thinking. But the fact they would constantly come back to the standards and process, but recognize the flexibility in the context
Absolutely.
that you need to look at when you go on these site visits. And I just thought it showed a professional depth of expertise and maturity beyond, I think what most would bring to us. So, and I do think, going back to your point about representation, we might need a district in addition to our county in terms of, I think we're losing one of our district representatives. So we might need to look at that as well. Is that right? Are we?
We have, of the 6 LEA members, we have 2 district and 2 county office
That are still going to stay with us?
that are going to
Okay.
stay with us.
Okay,
So it's an even split right now.
Okay, great. Okay, I wasn't sure. So, Commissioner Davis, the hard question was there a couple that stood out to you?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Well, let's go there then.
So this part of the process I'm a little green on, but I'm just going to name some names here. If this is appropriate to say in the phrase in this way, but I'd like to move forward a couple of candidates. Julie Sheldon, who is labeled #1 on the list, the first interview, and also Patrick McKee, labeled #8, as an interview in that order. And is it okay now to talk about potential alternates?
Well,
Go ahead.
No, because I think we have to make a second motion for alternates. So let's just stick with the first
Gotcha.
issue. Do we want to make that a motion, or do we want to still discuss? Do you want to still discuss? Let's
So
discuss more.
I might just again go back to, and I'm trying to find objective criteria here. And so the both Ms. Sheldon and Mr. McKee are from the Southern California region.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That was, I also was looking at, and I was looking at our Central Valley candidates.
Correct.
And their experience. And Malika certainly stood out with regard to her experience as Director of Educator Development.
Sure.
And then also working with CSEP earlier, and having that county representation of a very diverse community. And same thing with Marissa Luna Lopez, with her experience along from SPED to ELAD to librarian to coach to elementary school, UC Merced, I think she was the one who lived through an actual site visit and accreditation process. So her experience from seriously K through 20 was it really stood out to me.
Right. And I actually would completely echo what you're saying, Commissioner Martinez. I was really struck by Miss Luna Lopez's her letter, her own personal narrative and her story and her journey, and through all of California's public education, from school through community college, through the CSU to the UC, and her deep commitment, I think, to serve the young people in the Central Valley region. So I found her story, her contributions, her adaptability in the circumstances that
It's very compelling. Yeah.
to be very compelling.
Do you have any further comments on?
No.
Yeah. Were there others?
I would also add, going back to her, I was struck by her focus on culturally responsive approaches and practices. She talked about that more than I think the others did. Everyone's in such different places though in their careers. And so she may be someone who's still, got a long way to go in terms of growth and yes. But I think she brings a perspective that would complement the existing committee.
And I think she's at this place where, and the other thing I was struck by all of them, they're learners. They're all just curious, natural learners. They're doing this to contribute, but to learn. And I feel like as she has completed her PhD journey now, she's kind of ready to enter a new chapter. And that was part of her doing this. So she didn't have as much experience being on the VIRs, but her lived experience and her professional experience. And I think where she is in her journey, she was a really good candidate.
Yes.
Again, not to diminish anybody else, because this is a very hard decision to make.
I want to say I agree with Ms. Lopez's experience, future Dr. Lopez, and that experience and the candor and with which she expressed with that raw emotion about her own personal journey and experience there in the Central Valley. And, simpatico with her, I've experienced several of those kinds of, interactions with folks, and it doesn't get any easier and, to talk about when you hear the stories. But my ears were wide open and very receptive to everything she had to say, and very strong and very compelling, almost testimony here, today about her very lived experience. So, yeah.
And then like you, I was not sure about the balance around Southern and how we balance that. I was, really impressed with, again, Malika and Patrick. So I wasn't sure how we want to manage the balance around gender and around Central Valley. And with Stanislaus and then Merced, I think was soon to be Dr. Luna Lopez. I think she's Merced. So that would provide us with 2 Central Valley folks.
Absolutely.
And that's actually unusual and helpful to have that experience and that perspective.
So Mr. McGee would be from the LA area.
Yeah, he's closer to San Bernardino, it seemed like. And then the districts, it seemed like they ran almost west to east, right?
Well,
From LA to-
actually, he's in the San Gabriel Valley. I used to work in
Okay,
Covina
so-
Valley.
yeah.
And that area, when I worked in LA Unified first and then went to Covina Valley Schools, and the consortium covers that district that I worked at. And his district and the Bonita School District is about 40-ish miles from downtown Los Angeles.
Okay.
So still kind of in the LA County area. But again, it's very close again to San Bernardino County, about 70 miles away from there. So,
okay.
you know, geographically, yeah.
East, okay. It's helpful to know.
Good, good. So do we want to vote on the PK-12, on the K-12?
Yeah, I think that's, I think that's the order of events before we go on to that. So I think we want to do 2 things. I think we want to have a motion for 2 applicants for the K-12 on the COA. And then we want to go ahead and make a motion on the alternate pool as well. And so it's probably easier if we can either make 2 motions, 1 per person, or we can make 1 motion for the 2 that we would like to assume the role in the K-12 vacancies on the COA. Does that sound right, guys? Right? Okay.
Well,
so I'm the chair. I'm not going to make.
I'm happy to make a motion then, and I'll just make 1 motion.
Okay.
To nominate Mr. McKee and Miss Luna Lopez to serve as the nominees for the K-12 side of the Committee on Accreditation. And can I add to this motion to add as alternates both Miss Sheldon and Miss Bryant, if they are willing to serve. I'd love to have them.
1 motion to take care of our K-12 COA.
And I'll second that.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Monica, do you have anything to say? Nope. Nothing for
Like
me.
who else?
Yeah. Anybody? I have nothing else to say. So, wow, this small group, this is going to be so different than tomorrow. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. The motion carries. And so just to be clear, we have a motion and we have a second, and we have voted that Mr. McKee and soon to be Dr. Luna Lopez will serve, will fill the 2 K-12 vacancies on the COA, and that I have to get their names right. I'm just going to make it formal for our notes that Miss Bryant and go to my top.
Sheldon.
Yes, Miss Sheldon will serve. We'd like for them to be alternates. So those are our recommendations, and both of those were seconded and voted on. So they have passed. So appreciate that, and appreciate the conversation too about both of them. It was not an easy decision. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to talking about the higher ed folks.
So with the higher ed folks, I'll start with a UC representative because that is a vacancy we do need to fill. And I was very impressed by Dr. Leggett. For many reasons. I was impressed by everyone on this list, Dr. Jones as well. Some of the points that I wanted to make in regards to Dr. Leggett's nomination is firstly the different lenses that she wears and brings to the work that she does in higher education. The rich experiences in PK-12 that she shares with many of the other applicants, but also the fact that she has been a credential analyst. She has been a clinical placement and field placement coordinator. She's worked with candidates in many different capacities, including adjunct teaching, and currently serves as the director of teacher education through extended education too. So, bringing a different lens than some of our other.
Absolutely.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I totally agree. And I like the fact that she took lots and lots of risks in her career, and she purposely put herself in districts where there was a need for diversity, where there was a need to work with children of color, because I recognize all of the districts that she named in Southern California that where she had worked in the K-12 capacity, and the work that she was doing in those capacities was just admirable, remarkable, and my hat is off to her. She knows her stuff. When we speak of DEI, for example, it was implied, even if she didn't say, I do DEI, it's implied that she does DEI because she had that breadth of experience, boots to the ground, so to speak. And so I agree that she's a very strong candidate in this regard.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say, like, ditto on everything you guys brought up, and particularly about the DEI work, but also the diversity of the students she's working with.
Absolutely.
Who are going to go through, who are and have gone through this program and are going through this program. But I also liked her conversation when you asked the question around the pandemic and what we've learned from it, about the recognition and the need to be able to diversify our pedagogy.
Absolutely.
And to be able to integrate technology, but recognizing what a leap that is for us at the same time. So I thought that really rounded out everything you guys have talked about, and thought that Dr. Leggett was a strong candidate for UC.
Absolutely. And also wanted to talk about Dr. Hillis's experience as not just a current member of the COA, but also his breadth of lived experience and experience in education. And I learned so much more about him today through this process, because I had met, again, Dr. Hillis on a couple of different occasions at the COA, right? Because, he's the incumbent. But when I read his resume and the candidate statement and all of that, I was just like, wow. It was just, my mind was like, just sort of blown, because I didn't realize that he had so many years of experience in education, but then all of the different capacities and roles that he served at Pacific and at Cal Lutheran. I'm sorry, I lost the.
But the other one was Pacific, no?
Right.
He was there too.
Right. He was at Pacific Lutheran first, and then Cal, and then Tennessee previous.
Yeah.
And I only remember this because I have so much respect and admiration for him, but also that experience where he said, I saw a need, I filled the need. And again, going through that DEI lens, he put himself in there and made these strategic partnerships between his school, his institution, and the community in need. And that community, a large Latino population of students who desperately needed teachers to fill some roles that were empty at a time where most teaching spots were filled in the state of California, but they just really couldn't get a lot of candidates in that area. So those strategic partnerships are helping even today fill the void of the teacher deficit and the teacher supply that we have. So my hat's again off to Dr. Hillis there.
Yeah, I thought, he was, I thought it was interesting that his through line in his career is the accreditation. I mean, when he talks about NK, I mean,
yes.
You know that he's been doing accreditation for a while.
Yes.
But also the fact that he's partnering with districts.
Absolutely.
And how he has experience now with the teacher residencies program. And as we grow and learn about this grant program and how folks are implementing teacher residencies, and how it's going to shape some of the accreditation work.
Yes.
I just thought, not only would he be a great representative for the private sector nonprofit within the COA, but the accreditation experience and now a lived experience with residencies. So it's a very strong candidate. Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, he's an extremely seasoned administrator,
Absolutely.
but extremely passionate about accreditation,
Yes.
which is wonderful.
Yes.
Especially for this committee.
That's right.
So yes, I would agree.
All right. So do you want to make a motion?
Well, how many candidates are we?
So we're gonna make a motion for two to serve on the
Okay.
COA for for higher ed,
Okay.
and then two alternates as well.
Okay.
We have enough for two, yeah.
And yes. Okay. So I'd like to make a motion to move forward for a recommendation of Mike Hillis and Allison Leggett with, let's see, hold on a second, Ann Jones and Hannah Getty as alternates.
I second.
Open up to discussion. All I can say is I couldn't agree anymore. And I feel very fortunate that we not only have two really good candidates, but we have two alternates because as the commission has explained, it is not uncommon for them to be called upon.
Sure.
And we need this strong bench, and also to know that this is in some ways training ground for them to ultimately be on COA as they will serve a term and be eligible to apply. So I feel like we've developed a pipeline at the same time that we have very good candidates. So with that, we'll take a vote. And all those in favor of appointing or recommending Mike Hillis and Allison Leggett to the COA for higher education. And did I say it right? Okay.
I second it.
Yeah, she did. Yeah. And yeah, okay. And then we're also, the motion is that Hannah Getty and Ann Jones and Hannah Getty would serve as alternates. So that is the motion that was given and has been carried and voted on. And with that,
not voted yet.
Oh, we haven't voted yet. We're going to vote now. That's right. I restated the motion. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, the motion has carried. And these are the recommendations that we will take to the full commission. So thank you for extra 4 hours maybe today, 3.5 until we get to come back tomorrow. I will officially close this meeting today, and we will finish this off on item 3K on Friday. Just so you guys know, I can present this on Friday, or you guys can present this on Friday. So my suggestion might be that you present the higher ed COA candidates and that you present the K-12 candidates.
Sure.
Because as you know, I'm a chair and they're going to hear plenty of me in the next couple of days.
And it's very possible.
Okay, if you're, I will take up if you are gone by then.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right, so having no further business, I now adjourn the April meeting of the ad hoc committee, and thank you both very much.
Thank you.